у серці, як дизель в двигунах, важкий кевларний грім, він душу опікає, атаку сухопутні, ідуть війська! Піхота йде, вони безстрашні, піхота рве, ворожу пащу, ми маєм йти, міцніше сталі, віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний грім, несуть армади після землі, міцніше сталі, за нами мир, і честь держави.
Похід далекий сурми, засурмили над великим лугом, хмариться блакить. Гей, сідлай воковий козаченьки милі, гей, ходімо, браття, волю оборони. Гей, сідлай воковий козаченьки милі, гей, ходімо, браття, волю оборони. Сяє дивний жовтий мак, синя хвиля грає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає. Ой, сумує, не зажуриться, коли довидуктала дідом степова орда. Виглядає сина мати, Україна тужить у полоні, бранка молода. Виглядає сина мати, Україна тужить у полоні, бранка молода. Сяє дивний жовтий мак, синя хвиля грає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає. Нам дорогу світять мали, нові зорі та благословення рідної землі. Гей, ордини спорія, не чару морі, а козацька доля, де цонять шаблі. Гей, ордини спорія, не чару морі, а козацька доля, де цонять шаблі. Сяє дивний жовтий мак, синя хвиля грає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає, запорозький козак двічі не вмирає.
Гей, Мась! Гей, Мась!
Із Америки приїхав наш надійний побратим, познайомтеся із ним.
Гей, Мась!
В росіян зі сраки дим.
Гей, Мась!
Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла.
Гей, Мась!
За ракетою ракету на паскудних ворогів випускає весь наш гнів.
Гей, Мась!
Робить все без зайвих слів.
Гей, Мась!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Гей, Мась!
Московити зі снарядами гребуться на складах, коли робить свій бабах.
Хай Марс!
Наганяє лютий страх.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Розробляють окупанти свої плани у штабах, але чуть не знов бабах.
Хай Марс!
Лупить нечисть по зубах.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Окупанти лиш заповнили склади своїм пальним, як вітається із ним.
Хай Марс!
Підіймає чорний дим.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Не любити московитів і довести нелюбов помагає знов і знов.
Хай Марс!
Найточніший орколов.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, та вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 170 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. And I was actually conflicted onto what tonight's stream should be titled. We have two big things that I would like to cover today, but we did pick one over the other. But we will be covering the second one a little bit out of order here, just because it is raw insanity coming right out of Russia. So, without further ado, let's move down to the northern Donbass area first and cover everything that happened in between Lysychansk down south of Bakhmut. Starting at the northernmost part of this front line where action was seen, we could see the Russians coming under artillery fire once more by Ukrainian forces. And interestingly enough, this video is actually from a Russian BTR-82 crew. So, without further ado, here's the video. See some artillery landing on the road right in front of them, and the BTR is starting to come to a slow stop as they're starting to decide maybe it's not a smart idea to go that way.
Что, развернемся, может, пока?
We now see it moving forward again, but taking a turn. Where in the world could they be taking a turn to? Ah, yes. It looks like the classic turn and go the other way strategy. This has actually worked for the Russians a couple of times, and in this film, it appears to have worked since the video was uploaded later on. Kind of smart. Sometimes Russians will just drive straight into the artillery fire and get hit by it, so this is the first time we've ever seen a Russian armored personnel carrier or tank crew practicing any kind of intelligence. We hear another shell land incredibly close to them just a little ways down the road, and now they've decided to take a three-point turn. As a matter of fact, they're not going to be turning down that road. They're putting it into reverse again to literally do a complete 180 and go the other way. Pretty smart from these Russians, and they probably will live to turn around and run away another day. Moving on further down the front and towards the area of the town that's incredibly difficult for me to pronounce, Verkno Kamyanka, we could then see artillery hitting the Russians further down the line once more. As the video loads, we can then see the Russians moving amongst these destroyed houses in the area, and we can see a large group of them here. Also, if I unmute the music, you can hear the fun stuff. But sadly, I have to keep it muted or else YouTube will come down and break my kneecaps, much like the IRS will do. We now see them gathering around in a large group. And then an artillery shell lands right nearby, incredibly close to them, most likely showering the entire group with shrapnel and taking them out. Although we can't really see that all too well because of the amount of smoke and debris that has been flung up by the explosion. Still, a very close shot, and I gotta say, it's impressive to see that the Ukrainians are still raining down that precise artillery fire this late into the war. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next piece of news further down the front line, getting closer to Bakhmut in the news that we, of course, discussed in the thumbnail tonight. And we can see here that the 3rd Brigade has also hit the Russians in this area as well. Pretty much all of the action we've seen today on this part of the front has been perpetrated by the Ukrainians, and they've been artillery attacks against Russian forces that appear to be kind of hunkered down in their own positions. We can see them dropping a bomblet here onto the Russian we just saw on film, and it slammed right into the house. But the camera is trying to focus, and it's not doing that good of a job, but it did slam down right on top of him, and we would assume that he's most likely been taken out, although we couldn't confirm that on film. Now, it's time for us to get to the news that was actually in the thumbnail tonight, and also in the title. And so, without further ado, let me tell you all the big news that we've seen. Something that's been said a lot, but I haven't had a lot of video evidence to back up, is that the Russians have been launching multiple offensives, one after the other, each one failing in every single attempt, towards the town of Bakhmut, which will become the next major battlefield of this area of Ukraine if these offensives are successful. However, each time we heard that they were repelled, and we never really got a lot of video or picture evidence to speak about these counterattacks really at all until today, and surprisingly enough, the news and video we got was of the Wagner Group after they had literally been swept off the battlefield by the Ukrainians in pretty much, I guess you could say, a counterattack, it seems, as they are on the exact place that these Wagner soldiers still lay on the ground. So without further ado, I'm going to show you all this video in its entirety. I think it may have a little bit of copyrighted music in it. It is from Radio Free Europe, but I'm going to show this to y'all because it does portray an important story of what's going on in the war. And so, without further ado, here's the video.
Просто почалась стрілкотня по сусідам, які у нас в сусідній зеленці стояли.
Now, before we continue on with the interview, I just want to make this clear that the pictures of the bodies that were on the ground are of the Wagner Group soldiers that were taken out in the last offensive that was directed towards the area of Bakhmut, and also the patches confirmed that they were from the Wagner Group. So, with that in mind, now I'm going to let this interview continue.
Ідентифікували, візуально підтвердили, що ворог дійсно починає потроху просуватись в нашу сторону, відкрили вогонь зі стрілецької зброї. А те, що вони вагнерівці, просто вже потім вилізли, подивились на, ну там, шеврон «Смерть з косою» була, і далі вже все було зрозуміло, що то саме безпосередньо вагнерівці.
Відкрився вогонь на ураження, потім трішки повоювали, постріляли, вони відійшли. Після цього, як вони відійшли, прийшли, дивилися, що там є які полонені, ну, ранених не було, були тільки 200. Там були у них різні нашивки, всякі такі зелені пов'язки на арабській мові. Ну, і лиця їхні, обличчя, точніше так скажемо, вони були не слов'янської зовнішності.
По озброєнню у них звичайні автомати Калашникова калібру 7,62. Більше в них я не помічав нічого особливого. По екіпіровці в них також форма, звичайна форма їхня. Або горка, так називаємо.
А по чому саме тоді зрозуміло, що це вагнерівці?
По їхніх шевронах, на яких було дуже часто помічено вислів «Я ні во що не вірю, я здесь ради насилля». Тобто регулярна армія рідко такі шеврони носять. У них не було ні шевронів якихось їхніх окремих підрозділів або ще щось.
Вони йдуть за бабки, дохнуть за бабки, тому якоїсь такої тактики суперкрутої ми не побачили. Втрати якось треба приховувати, і робити це іншим чином неможливо. Тому простіше наняти якихось там уголовників, пускати їх на м'ясо, не рахувати і все. А результативність їм не особливо треба. Їм просто треба, щоб давили силою і все.
Регуляри з Кінь почали активно демілітаризовуватись ще на початку війни, і потрібно було якось поповнити ці втрати. А вагнерівці, найманці – це один з найлегших шляхів, люди, які просто хочуть грошей.
І після бою ми забирали, знаходили трофейні рації ворога. Ми записували їхню розмову із командиром. До нас підходили, один раз рота підходила, їхня штурмова рота підходила. Перед цим підходили взводами до нас, вони, тобто по 20-30 чоловік вони до нас підходили. Після бою з нами в них поверталося живої сили приблизно чоловік 8-7. По рації було чутно, що командир їхній зразу запрашував евакуаційну машину, але їхній командир із штабу, чи звідки там, я не знаю, не давав команди, щоб повертатися за ними або якось при можливості врятувати своїх людей.
The Wagner unit has also been in action in Syria as well, and went up directly against American forces there. The Americans, as far as we were able to tell and the story goes, wiped the Wagner group off the field, pretty much like we saw here. So once again, we've seen the Wagner group in action. We've seen them get struck and beat around multiple times by the Ukrainians. The most recent event that showed that the Wagner group was getting smacked around was when their headquarters in Alchevsk at the, I believe the arena. Well, actually, it may have been Khadivka, I believe. It was the It was the Stadium Pobiedy, which means Victory Stadium, and we saw their headquarters, which was inside the bleachers, get struck and destroyed. So this isn't the first time that we've seen the Wagner Group get slaughtered over the course of this war, but this is the most recent time, and it does show something interesting. As all of the interviewees were speaking about, the Russians are trying to hide their casualties, and something that a lot of countries do, including the United States, is hire out their work that needs to be done to private military contractors, which are also called mercenaries. Honestly, I feel like the title mercenary is far more fitting than private military contractor. That's once again trying to gentrify the terms of war and make them too overcomplicated, in my opinion. So we'll just call all of them mercenaries. The United States actually used a lot of mercenaries in Iraq. Usually they were charged with security behind the lines and such things like that. And also they were used to some extent in Afghanistan, but far more in the invasion of Iraq. The Russians also do the same thing in Syria. They hired a massive amount of mercenaries to do their bidding there, and as far as we know, they did somewhat mediocre. Just because you're a mercenary does not mean that it is going to be an incredibly good fighting force and incredibly well trained. These soldiers are only after the money, and they only optimize their performance so that way they can collect on a paycheck and hopefully live by the end of it. So pretty interesting to see there, and as we can see in those videos, in those pictures, apparently the multiple pushes towards Bakhmut so far have completely failed. It appears that the Russians are no longer using the newer strategy that they made several months ago, where a motorized brigade would attack the Ukrainians head on, and then an airborne brigade would try and shoot through the lines and create a breakthrough, which would lead the Ukrainians to retreat. It seems they've now completely abandoned that strategy in this specific area, where that kind of doctrine and strategy was formed, and they've now resorted to the strategy that they're conducting across the entirety of the front lines, which is just straight-on pushes into the Ukrainian lines, and eventually hoping to break their defenses where they'll fall back. A very unsuccessful tactic throughout all of history. Usually you have to create some kind of breakthrough to threaten the rear, and then the army will retreat. Well, the army you're attacking will retreat. Moving on from that and into Soledar, we saw some wounded being evacuated from the town, and this does show that there are still civilians, as we can see in this picture, under direct threat from the Russian invasion, I guess you could say. We know, and we've known this full and well throughout a large portion of this war, that the Russians make no consideration whatsoever as to whether there's civilians in an area or not. If there is just the semblance or the idea that Ukrainians could be in an area, they will shell it regardless whether they're there or not, and regardless whether there are civilians there or not. An unfortunate picture to see, but it is good to know that so far Soledar has not fallen into Russian hands, and the Ukrainians still control it, so that way these people would not be subjected to even worse atrocities like the massacres that happened in the Bucha-Hostomel Irpin area and also Borodyanka, which were liberated a long time ago at this point, but the atrocities there were clear to see. We're now going to be moving on down into Bakhmut city, and I've got to say, the Russian bots are once again trying to paint a story, but if you notice something about these pictures, it's the complete opposite of what they're saying. So let's click on this, and I'm going to read y'all the caption the way the Russian bots would like people to read it, and then I'll also explain it. Bakhmut, the orcs are already on the outskirts of the city. I mean, first off, watch this. They're trying to build up the confidence of people who dislike the Russians by saying orcs. So they're like, oh, okay, this guy's on my side. And then they say the orcs are already on the outskirts of the city. And over the next 4 pictures, they show a man wearing shorts in front of a crater. They then show I would say it's most likely a grad rocket that slammed down into the pavement and not exploded. They also show another crater. It appears it may actually be in the same area as this one from a different angle. And then finally, the last picture is another grad rocket that slammed into the tarmac and not exploded. Where in the world does this show that the Russians are on the outskirts of the city? You could make this argument for Lviv, even. You know, watching Russian ballistic and cruise missiles slamming into Lviv, you could say, oh my god, the Russians, they're in Lviv. And it doesn't stand up at all. It doesn't make any sense to say something like that, and it's completely unfounded. As far as we know, the Russians are still being held up near the Soledar area and out a couple of miles away, although this area that's in red is kind of a gray area right now, at least up to Pokrovsk. We don't know where the Russians are in this area. We haven't been able to confirm off of video or picture evidence how far they have advanced over the past month. The last we were able to tell and confirm is that they were about a mile or 2 outside of Popasna, past this rail yard, which you can see here on the map. So with that in mind, once again, a pro-Russian person is trying to put a spin on this and make you believe that the Ukrainians are about to lose Bakhmut, and the Russians have just steamrolled their way straight up to the city, but the pictures don't even show that, and the facts and the information that we've been able to confirm gets nowhere close to making a picture seem as grave as that. We're now going to be moving down to the last bit of news before we move on to the next big news that we had today, where we can then see a peon, a Ukrainian peon, in action. Unfortunately, I will have to keep the music muted. We actually played this music in the waiting room before. It is a really good rendition of a Ukrainian song, but since then it has been copyrighted, and YouTube came down and threatened to bust our eyeballs out of our sockets if we didn't remove the videos, well, the music. So fortunately I can't play it, but here's the video. We can see them loading the peon. And these things are just massive. 203 millimeters of raw firepower. Both the Ukrainians and the Russians use these, and it's always impressive to see them fire, as they're one of the largest caliber artillery pieces that are used. You now see the crew walking off. The piece fires, kicking up dust all over the place, and sending a massive 203 millimeter shell downrange towards the Russian forces. We don't know what it hit or if it hit anything, but it's still impressive to see that they fired it at the Russians once more, and that they still have the logistical connections and supply lines in the background to keep these things going almost non-stop. We've never gone a large amount of time without seeing these peons in action, or, for example, MLRSs for that as well. And so it does show us that the logistics of the Ukrainian side are still pumping out the volume of supplies that are needed to keep these frontline units running. With that, we now covered all of the news of this northern Donbass segment. We'll be reaching the rest of the news around the country later on, but I have to bring y'all to something that is just wild. A lot of y'all may know this, and we've actually talked about this on stream before, but there's this guy who used to kind of be popular in the United States, but he really fell off really quickly, as a matter of fact, and a lot of people found out he's kind of a scummy guy. But this guy right here, called Steven Seagal, he's actually been in a couple of American action movies. Everyone who's dealt with him says that he's a, for lack of a better word, an asshole, and they don't really like having known that they even encountered him. And so this guy has been living in a delusion his entire life. He even believes that he can do some kind of a magical martial arts routine where he doesn't even touch the other person and he can knock them out. Kind of a scam in a way. Anyways, he moved to Russia several years ago. I don't even think he ancestrally has any connections to Russia, but of course, he felt really connected to the place. Look, there he is behind Putin. Really magic connection. So anyways, over the years, he's stayed in Russia. He's really acted like he's a real Russian guy, and, you know, he's done this crap in the meantime. And so now, apparently, he went to the Olenivka prisoner of war camp, where the Russians deliberately shelled the Azov prisoner of war camp, killing scores of Ukrainians, went down there and spun a lie that the Ukrainians attacked the prisoner of war camp that held their own soldiers, and then came back to Russia, and you wouldn't believe it, he showed up on our favorite Russian TV show, spewing the kind of lies that you just couldn't make up. You can actually hear his voice through the dub, the Russian dub, and there's also subtitles on it. And so I'm just going to let y'all see this video. It's a little bit of a long one, but the absolute BS that spews out of his mouth is unbelievable. And it's crazy to think that him, a full-blooded American born and raised here in the United States, would say such unprovocated things against the West and the United States as a whole. It's unbelievable, actually. So I'm just going to let y'all see the video. And of course, I think since the subtitles are going to be kind of obscured from y'all at the bottom of the screen, I'll actually have to read off the subtitles for this guy talking, but I'm going to unmute it for Steven Seagal because you can kind of hear the English in the background. So here's the video. Steven Seagal returned from the Donbass days ago, where he was filming a documentary. Also, look at this stupid shirt he's wearing. I don't know about you, Matthew. I know you can see it, but what in the world is this shirt? It's that Karate Kid thing we were talking about the other day.
I don't know. It looks like something Japanese or Chinese or something. I have no clue why he'd be wearing that either. It's like, what is he trying to imitate? I asked that last night, but I still can't place it.
I just don't even get this guy at all. Anyways, I'm gonna let this continue, and I'm going to read the subtitles, so we're gonna let it continue. About the atrocities by Ukrainian armed forces, he visited the Olenivka prison, where the Kyiv regime killed over 500 Azov members using U.S.-supplied HIMARS. These were the witnesses to the crimes by the current Ukrainian government and their Western handlers. So now here's Steven Seagal's part. So I'm gonna mute this because you can kind of hear him talking in the background.
Знаете, я занимаюсь изучением этого конфликта, и я заметил, что там есть огромное количество ложных новостей в этом конфликте, более чем где-либо за всю мою жизнь. И я начал расследование и понял, что 98 примерно процентов репортажей, которые публикуются на Украине,
What is he talking about? Okay, with us, I will say that we've never been to Ukraine during the entirety of the war. We would be in that quote-unquote 98% he's talking about. But we literally just got done watching nothing but films and videos taken in Ukraine, and also Radio Free Europe, which we cite a lot on this channel. Literally all of their stories come from inside Ukraine, talking to the soldiers on the ground, the people there. What is he talking about? 98% of the reporting is done outside of Ukraine and they've never been there. That is just absolute BS. And also I just saw someone say he's Lord Haw Haw, which is very true.
делаются людьми, которые там никогда не были, вообще никогда. И они...
And what is he talking about troll farms? And the videos we get, specifically talking about us, because I kind of feel like this attack is directed at a channel like ours. Where in the world is the troll farm we're getting our news from? We report every single video we can find in the front lines. It's not like troll farms like get on Arma 3 or something and film non-stop footage of the war. You know, and on top of that, sometimes we even show videos of the Russians, on the rare occasion that they're able to, being able to try and hit Ukrainian forces. So I don't even know what he's talking about. He's just straight up out of his mind. So we're going to let it continue.
Получают информацию из неизвестных, непонятных, недостоверных источников. Они просто получают материал и даже не пытаются вникнуть, они распространяют просто эти новости. Это ужасно. И вместе с министром иностранных дел на встрече мы решили...
Fake news is more dangerous than nuclear missiles. Now, I know that the Darwin Award is for people who try stupid stuff and win stupid prizes, but we need to come up with a new award for stupid statements like this one. How in the way you can say whatever you wish, but if you spread fake news, I would say that's far less destructive than a nuclear missile leveling Midtown Manhattan and killing about 1 million people. I would say that in that regard, fake news would be a little less dangerous. And also, notice how deeply Steven Seagal is planted into the Russian, I guess you could say, sphere, the governmental sphere, that he just casually says, I was talking to the foreign minister the other day. That kind of tells you that he's kind of out there putting the state-sanctioned spin on everything. He's putting the old...
Now, Enforcer, do you notice how he is nervous, he's fidgeting around, and he's a little off-kilter, or is it just me?
I've been noticing that a little bit, and have you noticed that his statements are about the level that a 5th grader would make, like in terms of his actual vocabulary, if you're able to hear it?
And I will say, I really don't like Steven Seagal, but I wonder if he's on here because he's forced to, or is he here on his own volition?
I would honestly say, knowing Steven Seagal and how crazy he's been over the past, that he's probably here on his own volition, because he went and made that documentary, of course, and why in the world would he go there and do that on his own accord, or be forced to, and be so passionate about it? Because I actually did watch that little documentary he made. Couldn't show it on stream, of course, because it was way too long, but he was way too passionate about the story he was trying to tell for me to think that he was being forced to do it. It seemed more so that he was actually more than eager to do it. But anyways, we're going to let this video continue. Matthew actually made some really good points there, so we're going to let this go on.
Что ложные новости хуже, чем ядерное оружие. Но я хочу сказать следующее. Если вы распространяете фейк-ньюс, ложные новости, а у вас...
You know, I love how he says... you know, you perpetrate fake news to the point that people in your country don't even know what the truth was. Wasn't it just about 3 days ago that the Saki airfield went up in a ball of flame and 10 aircraft were destroyed there, and the Russian government had Russia Today, the state-sanctioned news outlet, put out that an explosion didn't happen, even if it was a really minor one. No aircraft were damaged, no one was killed, and no ground equipment was destroyed either. Wasn't it them who came out with those lies the other day? Is Steven Seagal trying to say something secretly to the Russian people? Because he's certainly not saying anything to us. I can guarantee you that.
жители не знают, в чем правда, это значит, что их можно склонить к чему угодно и убедить в чем угодно. В конфликте, к серьезному конфликту склонить или даже подтолкнуть к войне. И сейчас мы близки к точке.
And I gotta ask this, y'all. What is up with the stupid glasses? I've never seen glasses this dumb in my life. This is like something a 1700s merchant would wear. You know, and I reenact, so I know exactly what those look like. And I just never have liked those glasses. And what in the world is he doing wearing something this goofy looking?
Невозврата. Миру нужно понять, какова разница между ложными и истинными, правдивыми новостями. Что интересно относительно Донбасса и Еленовски, я видел, что была ракетная атака. Говорили, что нашли обломки, осколки «Хаймарс». И действительно, я понимаю, что...
Looks like they're about to play Jeopardy or something.
Yeah. They set this stupid show up on TV like it's a game show. Like, they have the stage, and this guy he's talking to usually is standing in the center of the stage like he's some kind of game show host. So that's actually, yeah, that's pretty true.
Ракеты, которая взорвалась.
Here goes Steven Seagal with the almost normal lying he usually does. I saw HIMARS debris. I've seen HIMARS debris before. Where? Where have you seen that, Steven Seagal? Were you at the Fort Benning infantry, at the Fort Benning? Watching the HIMARS trying to hit artillery downrange? Well, where in the world do you see HIMARS debris before? How in the world do you even see HIMARS debris? When the missiles explode, they destroy themselves. So where in the world do you walk around like, yeah, that's the motor of a HIMARS missile. I've seen that before. Come on, this is just fake BS right here.
Вы уверены, что это были ракеты «Хаймарс», потому что на украинской стороне говорят о том, что это был внутренний взрыв, взрыв изнутри, то есть не что-то, что проникло снаружи. Знаете, я в этом деле разбираюсь, и я изучил помещение, и могу сказать точно, что это не взрыв бомбы снизу вверх. Есть отверстие наверху, проникла ракета и взорвалась внутри, зажгла все. И я также понял, что Степан Бандера и его учение на Украине очень распространено. Поэтому я думаю, что есть сотни тысяч...
Hundreds of thousands of Nazis. This guy thinks the Russians are fighting Nazi Germany or something. Because here's my thing. Isn't the classic, I guess you could say the German ideology of Nazism, aren't they vehemently against Jewish people? How come Zelensky, that's a Jew, is the president of Ukraine? If there was hundreds of thousands of Nazis in Ukraine, how is that discrepancy allowed? You know, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And here he goes, just saying, you know, I assume, based off of the hardcore facts I've gotten, there are hundreds of thousands of Nazis, because we actually sent out a survey, an online survey, asking them to say if they were Nazis or not, and hundreds of thousands of people said yes, or something like that. I don't even know how you back that claim up.
Нацистов, нацистских последователей, и многие из них хотят драться. Но вы понимаете, что вам устроит ад американская, европейская пресса. Сейчас крайне...
Well, I would say they are extremely anti-Russian because the Russians have invaded a country pretty much illegally without a good reason, and they're committing atrocities all over the place. I mean, I'm not even... Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm not even going to elaborate on that one. That one's pointless.
Антироссийски настроенные. Они попытаются уничтожить вас, стереть вас в порошок. Они не могут отменить вас с культурной точки зрения, потому что ваш голос будет услышан, но они попытаются сделать все, что в их силах для того...
That's kind of a stupid point because that documentary is actually circled around the internet pretty quickly because I've watched it. And I don't watch a lot of things on my own volition that are incredibly long, but that one, I had to be like, oh, I have to watch this one because I've got to see what this goofball's saying. And so for him to sit there and say, it's not going to make it out there into the world, well, obviously it's not going to be aired on CBS because who in the world would air someone who's got a gut sticking out that far? But also on the other thing, it's like, it's out there and people have watched it.
чтобы ваш документальный фильм не вышел на большие экраны, и чтобы уничтожить вашу репутацию. Как я говорил уже, я дипломат. Я горжусь тем, что я дипломат. Я считаю, что я хороший дипломат. Я учил...
He prides himself on being a good diplomat. That's why he went on to SNL when he was the host of it and told everyone, y'all are going to shut up and do it my way or else. He's a great diplomat, and he's famously known for going around and telling everyone he has connections with the mob and you better do what I say or there'll be consequences. That's the kind of great diplomat Steven Seagal is.
У лучших, и считаю, что это нейтральная видеозарисовка.
I love how he says it's a neutral piece, yet he claims there's hundreds of thousands of Nazis in Ukraine, and it was clearly and deliberately a Ukrainian attack meant to make the Russians look bad. That's almost about as pro-Russian as you can get in statements. And he's going to sit here, it's a neutral piece. Like, what? Come on. Anyways.
Я не пытаюсь принимать ничью-либо сторону, я просто интервьюирую людей, получаю доказательства, если попытаются убить меня за это. Ну что же, очень жаль.
Your voice
Ваш голос
will be heard by the American audience.
Услышит ли...
And we're going to roast him for it. His voice will be heard by the American audiences. And while, yes, he is being heard, and we're allowing this to air on our stream, this is about the stupidest stuff I've ever heard from anyone, and I bet y'all can agree with that.
Американская аудитория. Смогут ли они услышать правду? Потому что сейчас голливудские звезды принимают чью-то сторону. Например, Арнольд Шварценеггер записал обращение к россиянам. Некоторые другие малые и большие голливудские звезды приезжают туда, на Украину, чтобы поддержать Зеленского. Что вы можете им сказать? Я хочу сказать, знаете, я не буду говорить, кто кому.
I don't want to say who paid who, because he's getting paid by the Russian government. I mean, this is just silly at this point. This guy, this is almost like a satire, because everything he's saying about, everything both of them are saying about the other side is something that we've clearly seen the Russians doing over the course of the whole war.
Кому заплатил, чтобы кто-то что-то сказал. Но когда мне что-то интересно или непонятно, я думаю, что это непонятно и другим. Американцы не тупые поголовно, нет, они могут.
And we see them every single night on this stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 days a week. The actual footage and videos of the war. We don't watch some fat guy in a studio along with some weirdo maniac guy that's on the other side of the screen sit there and just talk about what they assume and what they've imagined the war to be. We sit here every single day. A lot of y'all are Americans, 55% of y'all are, and we sit here and we comb over all of the war videos that we've gotten for the day, and we give a neutral analysis of what's going on. If the Russians are pushing the Ukrainians back, we say that. If the Ukrainians are pushing the Russians back, which is almost often the case sometimes, we say that. So I don't know. He's really preaching to the choir at this point, because yes, Americans are incredibly smart, and they know how to look at actual war footage and interpret what's going on through the footage.
Распознать правду и видеть факты. Если вы представите им факты, они могут сделать выводы. Когда армия говорит, это не нацисты, а я интервьюировал их, я видел сотни нацистов.
If he's interviewed hundreds of them, where are the interviews? I would like to know where they are, because I've never seen them.
Они говорят, да, я сражался, нам нравится убивать людей, и у них татуировки. И Степан Бандера — это тот человек, который повлиял на очень большую часть украинского общества.
Wait a minute. He says Nazis have not left Ukraine from World War II. That means they would have been there for almost, like 50 more years of the Soviet Union, with Stalin purging the Ukrainian people over and over. And not only that, but usually the Ukrainians were put through a lot of hardships by the Soviet government that pretty much would have crushed this kind of stuff out. And so he's telling me that apparently the great Russian government, the Soviet government at the time, was not able to crush out Nazism? Is he saying that the Russians have flaw? Because that's pretty much what he's admitting here, because we know that Stalin went through and purged pretty much anyone that was against him at the time. You were either pro-Stalin or you were dead. And so here he goes, coming up with fake statements like this that you can't back up or prove or anything.
Со времен Второй мировой войны они не ушли из Украины. Многие думают, ну-ка, вот он начал войну, тот, кто первый выстрелил. Это на самом деле очень далеко от правды. Кто начинает войну? Тот, кто подталкивает соперника к тому моменту, к тому состоянию, когда выбора больше нет. И идет денацификация. Хорошо, если бы они были нацистами.
Wait a minute, he just said, if they're Nazis, let them be Nazis, we don't give a shit. But wasn't that the whole reason that they started the war, according to Putin? He said, we're starting a special military operation to denazify Ukraine. Don't you remember that, Matthew?
I believe so.
Yeah, and so that's the whole point, according to the Russians' official statement, as to why they started this thing.
Просто так, ну пускай будут нацистами, нам все равно. Но мы на самом деле, говорят русские, хотим, чтобы НАТО оттуда убралось. Мы хотим...
We're going to pause this because we've gotten about 6 minutes into this thing, and honestly, it's kind of gotten old. I don't know about y'all, but this is literally just nothing but just garbage. So we're gonna move on. If you would like to see this, because I know some people are gonna be going, "Oh, you didn't let him speak," you can click on the link to this map in the description below and watch this whole entire interview from start to finish if you would like. But for the reasons of the stream and also time constraints, we're going to move on. So with that, y'all have seen Steven Seagal. This was the other major giant piece of news I wanted to cover today, because the absolute lies and BS that he spewed was just completely unfounded and crazy. So with that, we're now going to be moving down to the Chernihiv area and the location unknowns, but before we get down there, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the next segment. And so with that, take it away, Matthew.
All right, and moving into our first question segment of the night. Up first, we have one order of business, and that is to address the poll that ended a short while ago. And the question was, which private military company, or PMC, do you believe was or is worse? 42% said the Wagner Group, 7% said the Blackwater Group, 38% said they are both bad, and 13% said not bad or good, they are PMCs. Personally, me, I would go with the 38% that said they are both bad, but if I had to choose which one was worse, I would have to say the Wagner Group. The Blackwater Group did have some atrocities that were alleged against them. I think some of them were actually proven, hence why they had to change their name to something else and totally rebrand. But I would have to go with the Wagner Group. And Enforcer, what are your thoughts on that poll?
I would have to say that it's certainly the case that the Wagner Group would be far worse. The Blackwater Group, of course, they did their own thing, and we all know about that here in the United States. It was a massive controversy. But one thing I would have to say is that it's not necessarily the private military companies that are deplorable. It's the fact of how governments address them. When the Blackwater Group did some very questionable things, it brought a lot of public attention in the United States, and it got so bad, and the publicity was so terrible about them, they had to go and of course, like Matthew said, change their name. And so it does show that while they still exist in a form to this day, the public shame that they got because of that, and also the political attention that was brought onto them and the scrutiny, led them to have to try and rebrand so that way they could dissociate from their past. Meanwhile, the Wagner Group, which has been around for quite some while now, around 8 to 9 years at this point, they've committed as many atrocities as they please, and not only do the Russians not do anything about it, it seems almost like they're proud of them. Look at our Wagner boys go. Look at them go and slaughter thousands of Syrians in the Syrian civil war. Look at them come to Ukraine and commit atrocities against the Ukrainians. Just look at them go. And that's almost how the Russian government treats them, and how the Russian public, at least as far as we've been able to see, treats them as well. And so for that reason, it makes the Wagner Group look a whole lot worse than Blackwater, in my opinion, because it doesn't even look like there is any kind of attempt to make themselves look better. They are just out there with what they do. We do it. Here's our patch. Our patch says some crazy stuff, and we're just going to sit here and stand by it, and the Russian public will, and the Russian government will as well. And so with that, I hope that does explain what I think on the poll, and I would have to agree with everyone on that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, to address the second poll that is up here, we have a question that says, should Steven Seagal, should his U.S. citizenship be revoked? 85% said yes, and 15% said no. And I see there is a debate in the chat about whether or not a U.S. citizen's citizenship can actually be revoked. And I have to admit, it's a little bit of a gray area. There is a way to lose it. However, you have to commit an act of treason against the United States or meet one of four conditions to actually lose it. Otherwise, you have to voluntarily renounce it. So maybe it's not totally feasible to revoke it, but for the purposes of the poll, what are your thoughts, Enforcer?
My thoughts on the poll would be is that if you go to another country that is openly unfriendly to the United States and start to say things against the United States and pretty much say that what they're doing is wrong, I would say that in its own right. Now, there's a difference. I would like to say this before I move on. If you're in the United States and you say something like this, you're protected under the First Amendment to say this kind of stuff, regardless whether I agree with it or not. You have a constitutional right to say really whatever you want. But if you go to another country and you get on TV there and you support something that is against the United States' interest, and in fact, pretty much say they are the enemy of the Russians and they're the enemy of me as well, pretty much is what he was saying, I would say that would be grounds, in my opinion, to revoke someone's citizenship. So with that, I hope that does address the poll, and I hope you'll kind of see the nuances there as to what I'm saying, because in the United States, you can really be whatever you want, and legally, and at least morally, it really isn't a way to stop anyone from doing that, and there really shouldn't be, because whenever I think about that kind of stuff, think about this. If we cut out pro-Russian people from having their own opinions and their own statements and airing them here in the United States, think if the tables were turned and they were the ones who were the majority and they started to suppress pro-Ukrainian sentiments. That wouldn't, that to me would be pretty deplorable. And so for that reason, that's why the First Amendment is kind of a double-edged sword in a way. You can say the things you agree on, but then at the same time, other people can say the complete opposite. So I hope you'll kind of get to the differences I'm making there. And so with that, we are going to move on into our first question of the segment.
All right. And moving into our first question of the segment, long awaited, we have a question from Gary Robbins, who puts in a $30 donation and says, if you had $1 billion to arm Ukraine right now, how much would you devote to HIMARS, HARMS, drones, M777, and javelins, and or any other munitions?
That is an excellent question. I would have to make an itemized statement on that to make sure I didn't exceed $1 billion, but I would say that about 20% of that would be dedicated to the HIMARS. I would dedicate another 15% to drones, which would create a massive army of drones, because if you dedicated $150 million into drones alone and weaponry to equip them with, you were talking about literal scores of drones. I would assume. Let's look. How much is the cost of a DJI Mavic again, Matthew? Like $550-ish?
Well, let's see. For a Mavic Air 2, I think it's around 700 or so. For the Mini, it's somewhere around 400.
Let's go with the most expensive one, the $700 drone. So 150 million divided by 700, you could give the Ukrainians literally a drone for every single soldier that was in the Ukrainian army pre-war. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the sheer amount of drones you could actually field because of that. And so every single infantryman would have a drone pretty much, rather than the TDF. The TDF would be a whole other situation. And if you could give that many drones to Ukrainian soldiers, not only can they direct the artillery fire, which we'll get to the HIMARS in a moment, better, they can also spot what's ahead of them far more efficiently than ever before. Because think about it, an entire infantry squad right now may just share 1 to 3 drones amongst them all based off of what we've been seeing. And with every single person in the squad having a drone, around 10 of them, you could have 6 to 8 drones airborne at a single time. Not all of them. That's a little unfeasible because there'd have to be people doing other stuff. But you could have about 8 drones at the most airborne at a single time, scanning the ground in front of you as you advance to see if there's any Russians up there. And so just imagine the kind of advantage the Ukrainians would have by getting that many drones alone, even if it would be possible to buy that many. Moving on from that little segment, the HIMARS is kind of detached from that. The drones really can't help out the HIMARS much because it is a longer range MLRS system. Drones aren't really conducive for that. You would have to use something like a Bayraktar or satellite imagery to spot for a HIMARS. So with this in mind, moving on around the drone segment of things and actually pushing the Russians back on the front line itself, one thing I would consider dreadfully important would be more M777s. Because while the HIMARS are doing a decent, and well, not just a decent, but an incredible job of knocking out the infrastructure that literally keeps the front lines going, the M777s can actually make a difference as to who controls the ground here on the front. And so I would dedicate a whole lot more funding, not just for the M777s. I would actually try and see, funding-wise, if a lot of those funds could be diverted to wheeled SPGs like the Caesar, which uses the exact same 155mm shell. It's a NATO standard, but it's on a wheeled platform and can be set up and stowed away a lot quicker, making it shoot and scoot much more efficient. The M777, of course, is an incredible piece, but I think the Caesar really optimizes it by making it far easier to move and transport. And so I would see about getting Caesars instead of M777s and filling that gap that way. We could then further move from that and integrate the drones, because we have far more drones and far more artillery, and use those drones to spot for literally every single artillery shell that could be fired from these Caesars, wiping Russian frontline units pretty much off the map. You could, of course, do breakthroughs where you just target a small area of the front with a lot of concentrated and deadly accurate artillery fire due to the amount of reconnaissance you have, and then throw an entire motorized battalion straight through, which would freak the Russians out because now there's Ukrainians behind their lines and they would have to retreat. Regardless of how far, it still would be ground made. So I can't really tell you about how I break up the rest of it because I feel like I'm getting incredibly detailed at this right now, explaining what I would do with it. But still, those are the kind of things I would focus on if a whole $1 billion was just given and they just said, go wild, buy whatever you want, as long as it's helping to win the war. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we were able to answer that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Compound David, who says Wagner Group leadership is Colonel Klink and Sergeant Schultz. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. And also the other thing is that, yes, I do know what you're talking about, Colonel Klink and Sergeant Schultz. That is from, let's see, what is it? What's that show? It's the one, Hogan's Heroes. That's what it's from. And so I thank you so much for the support and the pretty funny little joke. That's a great one. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support in keeping the Lee Spring Army and these streams running. Without y'all support, it wouldn't be possible. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into the next bit of news.
All right. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops, who says everyone deserves hygiene products. Psyops, I said I was going to read it, but now that I read it a second time, I think I'm going to have to pass on reading that one off on stream. But thank you very much, Psyops, for your support. And yes, it was quite funny to me, but sadly, can't read it off. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to that $20 super chat?
I think I saw the specific one you're talking about, and I do thank you for the support. I don't really know what that was supposed to mean, but of course, Psyops, you've been around for a bit, helping us to keep on running this channel, and so thank you so much once again for helping out. Sadly, it seems that Matthew has found something that he can't really read on stream, and if he's making that kind of judgment, I'm just going to have to go with it. So thank you once again for the support, and with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. We're going to try and answer as many questions as we can tonight. If you have sent in a super chat, we will answer that question. We answer all of them by the end of the night, and we will answer as many live chat questions as possible. With that, we're now going to be moving into Chernihiv, where we can see one of the defenders of the city of Chernihiv, and of course, the Battle of Chernihiv was 1 month ago. We can see the reason why one of them was fighting, and it's because he loves McDonald's. And so I'm going to let y'all see this video, and literally, the whole entire thing that he says is about McDonald's. It literally says right here, McDonald's, right there. And so there's a translation just further down. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, man. Man, sadly, I think it's actually in the caption. Let me just read y'all the caption of this because I believe this is the translation, and then I'll let y'all see the video and the enthusiasm this man has for McDonald's. Here's how it goes. Have you already said goodbye to life? Every day, a couple of times. What am I supposed to get used to or what? I have nothing to lose. I love Chernihiv. McDonald's is cool here because it wasn't in our best interest to let them in and have them destroy McDonald's. And so here's the video of him actually saying that.
Прощался уже, нет?
Да, каждый день по пару раз. Ну что, мне привыкать или что? Мне терять нечего, я Чернигов люблю. Тут Макдональдс прикольный. Потому что не в наших интересах было пропустить их туда. Чтобы они Макдональдс разрушили, зачем мне?
and they even had the corporate music in the background. It's literally a McDonald's ad in the middle of a war. And I gotta say, this guy really sold it. I mean, like, you can tell his enthusiasm was hardcore into McDonald's. This man is not fighting for Ukraine. He's fighting for McDonald's. He's like, what are we gonna do? Let them march through the city and destroy McDonald's? No way. Like, if you asked him who President Zelensky was, he wouldn't be able to tell you. But if you asked him who Ronald McDonald was, this guy knows. I can't believe this guy just worships McDonald's. But still, whatever motivates you. And it's pretty funny to see that this man's like life's dream is McDonald's. I bet you McDonald's is actually going to offer him a job because they are reopening in Ukraine right now as we speak. And they're going to be like, hey, dude, you want to work at McDonald's after this war? We're going to make you a manager because what you did was pretty cool. So with that, you got, I have to say, man, this is one of the craziest things I've seen. Do you have any comments on this?
Sadly, I couldn't hear it because audio doesn't come through on my end on Discord. But that is pretty interesting that he is so excited about McDonald's. He wants a Big Mac.
This man is going to kill for a Big Mac. Him and Mr. Lunchtime are going to duke it out. I promise you that. Because this man is not going to let McDonald's go without a fight. So with that, we're going to move on. And I got to say, this guy may have been joking. He may have actually been serious. I don't really know. He may just be a giant fan of McDonald's. Regardless, it was a funny video, and I gotta respect the guy for that. And so with that, we're gonna move on to the next bit of news out of Chernihiv and down in the location unknowns and actually speak of the frontline news that came out today that we weren't able to tack down to a specific spot. So, good morning, we are from Ukraine. This is a great one. This is a video of Ukrainian soldiers walking through a Russian camp. Apparently, they just walked. Apparently, there was no sentries. They just walked in, woke up a Russian, and just said, "Good morning. We are from Ukraine." And so here's the video of that happening. You see all the Russian stuff on the ground, uniforms, kit, and all. They're now walking up to the Russian, who's wrapped in the blanket. And of course they played the music at the end, but you can see, let's just mute the music real quick and look at the raw emotion. You can see this guy sleeping. He doesn't expect to be bothered by anything. And then you feel someone kick his leg, and he's like, what? And you can see on his face right there, he's just realized this was a bad mistake. Also, another thing that backs up that this is a Russian is that he has that blue and white striped shirt on, which the Ukrainians have by and large abandoned completely at this point. And he also has the Ratnik jacket on as well. And also all the clothes on the ground. You can also see one of the frog patterns that the Russians still use. But a lot of it was Ratnik camo, which is something that the Russians only use. The Ukrainians have no Ratnik camo to speak of. So you can see right there at the end of that video, that guy has realized, oh no, this is a Ukrainian. So with that, that's the end of that video. We didn't see anything beyond it, but that was still pretty funny. Moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, we can see a Ukrainian sniper at work and a Russian winning the Darwin Award, as this is something that has literally been taught in the military for the past 100 years. I know this for sure because in World War I, this was one of the most important things they told people when going up to the front line trenches in no man's land. Here's the video. When you see a Russian there peeking his head through a window, and you can see right here their crosshair. Now, I bet y'all can add 2 and 2 together before we actually get to that part of the video. But the #1 rule of war is you don't stick your head over an open area for longer than 2 seconds or you will lose your head. And this guy apparently did not ever get that lesson. This is, I feel sorry for him because no one ever taught him this apparently, or he just didn't think about it. But there were literally pamphlets given out in the First World War once snipers started to become a bit of a problem on the front lines that told soldiers, do not stick your head over a trench for longer than 2 seconds. If you do, it will be taken off by a sniper. And in this video, it's not incredibly graphic. All you see is the crosshair line up. They blurred it out, but the guy did get hit, and that was the end of it for him. I just don't know why the Russians miss basics like that. When you're standing out in the open in a street, and you get hit by a sniper, you really can't do much about that. But when you're in a house with a window like that, and you literally just start looking out of it, come on. I mean, you know, I'm not going to rat on the guy too bad because, you know, we saw what happened to him, but still, You would think that someone would have told him something important like that, like, hey, man, don't, like, look out a window or anything. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian tank being destroyed by the Ukrainians. Once more. It's not anything new, but we've seen this a pretty good bit. So, when you see the Russian tank there, Z clearly marked on the front of it, it looks like a T-80B. We hear some nice rock music playing. And we now see them dropping the bomblet. And I don't know what in God's earth was that bomblet made of. That thing's the size of, like, the palm of your hand, and it led the tank into a thermonuclear explosion. Jeez! Oh my God! It literally turned the whole screen white. The tank was abandoned. No Russian crew members were lost in this video, or as they say in the film industry, no Russians were harmed in the making of this video. But what on earth is that thing made of? Jeez! I don't even know. I mean, tell me what that thing is, because I've never seen a bomblet do anything like that before, and it didn't even slam through a hatch on the turret into the ammunition. It actually slammed in front of the turret near where a fuel tank would be. And that is the tank. It's gone. It's the exact same tank we just saw a second ago. Now we can see it burning. Someone said there was landmines on top of the tank. We're gonna go back and review that footage. We can see that there was a small turret toss. Apparently it didn't really travel too far. So let's go back real quick, Matthew, and let's look at that again. Oh! There's land... Okay, yeah, now I see what y'all are talking about. There are landmines. They literally just... The Russians apparently just had them stacked up on the fender of the tank. So that way, if anything ever happened, if they hit a road bump, the whole tank would just go up. So that's why
I'm assuming that's not normal to put landmines on the outside of your tank.
I would assume not. Apparently, the Russians are trying out a new kind of explosive reactive armor, though, which is called a landmine. And as we can see here through testing, they apparently don't work too well. So with that pretty crazy video, just to see the whole entire screen go white from an explosion is very rare. But with that, we can see that the Ukrainians destroyed another abandoned Russian T-80BV, and considering that there were literally landmines all over it, I can kind of see the reason why the Russians abandoned it. Moving on into the next bit of location unknown news, we can see the Russians once again using the TOS thermobaric missile launcher and raining down fire onto a Ukrainian position, supposedly, although we didn't see any Ukrainian vehicles or soldiers in the film. Once again, we give the benefit of the doubt. If you could not see Russian or Ukrainian military equipment or personnel in a video, we can't tell what kind of damage has been caused. And in this video, we saw no soldiers or equipment. It looks like there is a little bit of black smoke there, and there was a small spurt of fire. But then again, we never saw a vehicle. The footage is so grainy right here. It may have been a vehicle, but once again, we can't even see to tell. So as far as we know, this was pretty much a toss being fired into an empty area and hitting nothing as far as we can tell. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians getting engaged in a firefight from their perspective. So with that, here's the video. We see him screwing a silencer onto the front of his gun. Oh, look at that! Matthew! Oh my god! Matthew, look! It's literally a Remington 700. The same bipod and everything.
It is.
It is.
How about that?
That is crazy. Just those of y'all who don't know, I have a Remington 700, and it's literally the exact same loadout, except for the suppressor.
Ладно, я швидко бігаю, тому. Плюс.
You now see him running across the open field, and we have to mute it because there's copyrighted music. I love the Woodstock. I don't have a Woodstock on mine. It's actually a form of polyester. Well, plastic. That's a simpler way of saying that. Plastic. Apparently there's an armored vehicle approaching. Let's see if there's any music still playing. There is, sadly. And you see him firing off his rifle, but we can't see what he's firing at. It appears the camera's attached to his chest. And it looks like he even has a detachable box mag for this Remington 700, which I can't really see here, but if he does have that, that's pretty nice. Let's see if they... Man, what did he say right here? Let's read that again. Russians beg for mercy that they surrender and then start firing. So apparently the Russians are pulling that old typical kind of a German move that a lot of people knew, have heard about in World War II that's always spoken about, where the Germans would walk up with like stretchers that had blankets over them like someone was dead on top of them, and take the blanket off and there was an MG42 on it, and they start lighting up the United States or the Brits or whoever was fighting them. And it appears that according to this Ukrainian, the Russians have done the exact same thing right here. And also I see a lot of people saying it's not a Remington 700. Yes, it didn't. I was just going to let that slide for a second. I was like, it's a bolt action, but it's not a Remington 700. The bolt was different, and also the receiver was different by and large. Now the music's picked up again, so we got to mute it. But we see them having a small little exchange, handing over an RPG like it's just a toy in a Happy Meal. See him tossing a grenade. Now it looks like it blew up pretty close to them, and so I don't know if the firefight's incredibly close. If it is, they are literally just right on the other side of this wall. You now see this guy firing an in-law. And Matthew, I want you to notice in the live chat, someone has taken offense to one of my historical stories.
It always happens.
It always happens. I'll find you a source for that. But we can see here the camera's now been moved to the wall, apparently, and we can see the guy in the background who has the chest camera on, holding his bolt action as they throw grenades over the wall. We can see that the firefight continues. You now see them standing near a vehicle. I'm sorry, I was trying to pull up a source for what I was saying earlier. But we can see that they had to, of course, censor something there for a second. We see them censoring something once more. But we can see here a BMP-2 that appears to have burned out that they were able to knock out. Now, I have seen some people saying that this may be old footage. And as far as I've been able to see, I've never seen this footage before. So for me, it was reported as today's news. So if it is old, sorry about that in advance. So with that is the end of the video. And a pretty interesting one at that, I have to say. It's actually really wild to see that some Ukrainians are using bolt-action rifles, not exactly like snipers, but sometimes just in the frontline units, as this guy was here. If he was using it as a sniper, we would have seen him detached from the rest of the infantry with probably just a spotter, and that would have been it. But this guy is pretty much just using it in a frontline unit, which is kind of interesting in a way. So with that, that's the end of the video. Pretty neat to see that they were able to win the firefight in that film, and it was a pretty lengthy engagement, about 4 minutes and 19 seconds long, even being edited down. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news. This is actually some rather big news. And y'all may remember that early on in the war, it was cheered on when we heard that the first Russian general had been taken out by Ukrainian forces because he had been tracked down by his cell phone. We've now heard that the Ukrainians, over the course of the past 170 days of war, have been able to take out 1,000 officers of the Russian armed forces. Here's the breakdown on paper. They've not gotten a general of the army. I believe the only general of the army the Russians have is, what's his name? Jeez. And it's Sergei Shoigu, I believe. No colonel generals, but they've gotten 2 lieutenant generals and 8 major generals. They've gotten 34 colonels, 206 captains, 328 senior lieutenants, 67 lieutenant colonels, 135 majors, 188 simple lieutenants, 32 of the other ranks, which totals up to a whopping 1,000 officers of the Russian armed forces. An incredible figure, and it really does give testimony to how well the Ukrainians are truly whipping the Russians. Of course, we have gotten video footage before showing some of the major generals being taken out, not up close where you can actually see them specifically, but we have seen their headquarters get targeted on drone a couple of times where we have been able to confirm that generals have been knocked out in this war. We also heard of one crazy story where a general was flying an aircraft and got shot down and killed that way. I would have to go back and try and find the name and the specific instance where we watched that, but it was quite interesting to see, to say the least. And it is interesting to see that the officer corps of the Russian army has taken this many casualties. That's rather high in terms of officers lost. With that, we're now moving on to our final bit of location unknown news. And this is pretty interesting. We've heard of Uber Eats before, and of course in Ukraine, a lot of people know about Uber Eats. Uber Eats is trying to spread worldwide, as y'all may know. And it appears that they didn't stop in Ukraine, as a BMP-2 crew appeared to have gotten Uber Eats on the run, literally. And so here's the video of a BMP-2, a Ukrainian one, driving down the road, and these people in the car handing over food and other stuff to them as they continue to drive down the road. You see them pull up beside the BMP. And now they're handing off stuff to the BMP crew. Now that is convenience. With that, that's the end of that video, and I gotta say, that was a pretty wild one. I've never seen anything like that happen before, and it's a good thing that the driver decided not to rubberneck it at the beginning, because that could have gone very bad if he hadn't just focused on driving the BMP straight forward. Like, I'm gonna show you all that again, because you can see it actually snap his head. Oh crap, if I look back for too long, I might crash the tank and end up killing the people in the car. See right here? He turns around like, what is going on? He's like, what is this? And then after that, he's like, wait a minute, I gotta keep focusing on driving. And then he just looks forward for the rest of the video. Pretty funny one. But with that, that's the end of our Location Unknown news today. It's a good way to end it on a pretty funny little note. And so with that, we'll now be moving further on down past the northern Donbass area, because we've already covered that news today, and we're actually going to be moving into our last news segment, which will be including everything on the southern front and Kherson as well. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into our final news segment for the night.
All right, and moving into our second to last question segment of the stream. Up first, we have a $50 super chat from BC Skyman, who I don't think left a comment. Hopefully I didn't miss it. I think he's still having a problem with the super chats and super stickers. I think actually I got it backwards. But anyways, BC, thank you very much for your very generous support. And Enforcer, do you have anything you'd like to add as well?
Yes, I do. I thank you so much, BC Skyman. You've been around literally since the dawn of time on this channel. You've been around since the before the Great Schism even. You've been around through everything. You've been here so long that I bet you literally saw the Lee Spring Army begin to form as a bit of an infant group, and now we've become a well-developed group of people who proudly support Ukraine and continue to help out on Sunday fundraisers and listen and pay attention to the news of what's going on. And I've got to thank you so much once again, because I know that you have a personal connection to Ukraine, and I thank you so much for helping us to continue to report this news and helping us to keep this thing going. And so thank you so much once again. And everyone, give a huge LSA to BC Skyman, who's been one of the veterans of this Lee Spring Army. I would say that he's certainly a lieutenant colonel here. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, BC Skyman.
Yes, indeed. And also, by the way, I forgot to say it, but BC Skyman is a channel legend. And moving on to the next one, we have a $50 super chat from Praise Adonai, also another channel legend, who says, Enforcer, BC Skyman beat me to the draw tonight. A what-if question. If Ukraine could take Kherson, Crimea, to Mariupol, would they give up Luhansk and Donbass? Don. Not saying I would, but curious. Yeehaw, y'all. Great show tonight. Slava Ukraine.
Matthew has fixed his microphone so good now that the yeehaw has come through unfiltered, which is incredible. But to answer that question, if the Ukrainians were able to take back pretty much everything but the Donbass, I think... Now, just take this as my opinion and let me explain why. I think they would maybe allow the DPR and LPR's pre-war borders to continue to exist and sign a treaty that would pretty much allow them to continue on. Here's my reasoning why. Though this war has started, not for the denazification of Ukraine or anything like that. That all was hocus-pocus talk that the Russians put out to sound like they had a moral cause for this. The entire reason that this war started is because they are scared that if Ukraine joined NATO, the United States would be within 200 miles of Volgograd, which is very concerning because right now, the United States is already within 70 miles of St. Petersburg, the second most strategic city in all of Russia, and if Ukraine joined NATO, the United States' armed forces along with the rest of NATO's would be within 200 miles striking distance of the third most strategic city in Russia, which is Volgograd, which is literally the key to the entire Volga River. If Ukraine joined NATO, the Russians would be at a severe disadvantage. Of course, as an American, I support that because it puts our rivals in a far worse position. But for the Russians, that's really the reason why this war began. That's also the reason why they went and annexed Crimea in 2014, because the Black Sea Fleet was stationed there. And after Yanukovych, because there's actually a kind of an interesting spin that's been going on in the United States that's largely believed, is that the United States ousted Yanukovych pretty much through their own, I guess you could say, string pulling and power. What had actually happened in Ukraine was that Yanukovych had shot down something that was almost unanimously approved by the Ukrainian Rada, which is their version of Congress, which led the Ukrainian public to revolt en masse. That would be like, just to give an example, that would be like in the United States, Congress approving, wait a minute, I just remembered exactly what it was. The Ukrainian Rada pretty much unanimously voted on kind of like EU economic, I guess you could say, cooperation, and they sent that to Yanukovych, who was the president at the time, and he shot it down just without question. It was almost immediate. And that would be like, here in the United States, a president shooting down, I guess you could say, being a member of the World Trade Organization. That's about how important that was to Ukraine at the time in terms of its economic progress and I guess you could say prosperity. So this led loads of Ukrainians to revolt because a lot of them had started to get away from Russia and more towards Europe as a whole. And so that's what led to Yanukovych being ousted. And when he got ousted, at that time, so far up till that point in history, Ukraine had largely been friendly with Russia incredibly well, and that's why the Black Sea Fleet was based in Sevastopol ever since 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed, is because the Ukrainians gave the Black Sea Fleet and the Russian Navy port rights to Sevastopol. They could dock their port there and keep it there however long they wanted to. And so when Yanukovych was ousted and a pro-EU leader came into office, the fear was that, considering that they were going to become pro-EU, which is pretty much the antithesis of the Russian sphere of influence, that Ukraine would kick the Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol, which is really the only port that the Black Sea Fleet can be based from. And that's why the Russians annexed Crimea in 2014 and started funding and pretty much directly supporting the rebels in the Donbass, was for all of that. And also the other thing for the rebels in Donbass was to create a larger buffer zone in between Ukraine and Volgograd if things went from bad to worse and Ukraine was to join NATO almost instantaneously. We can now see that the war is pretty much continuing on that reasoning as Zelensky, under his leadership as president, NATO, Ukraine, over like the past year pretty much, it's rather recent, that's why the war started, they started to try and finally move in the hardcore direction of joining NATO. And that's what led to all of the dominoes falling in place. And I've heard there was a lot of arguments at the start of this war about if so-and-so was in charge, this war wouldn't have happened. Under everyone else, every other administration in the United States, Ukraine had not seriously tried to go through the ratification process to be a member of NATO. And so the dominoes were not in place for this kind of conflict to begin. Regardless of who was in charge, the Russians would have had the exact same response as to what they're doing right now. And so with that in mind, that is the entire reason that this war started. And so with the Ukrainians knowing this full and well, they might be willing to give up the Donbass so that way the Russians would be happy. It would be a compromise that the Ukrainians would not be entirely happy with, but the Russians would get about an additional, if we measure on the major highway from Alchevsk to Luhansk in that direction, they would get about another 70-mile buffer zone from Ukrainian NATO to Volgograd. So I hope that answers the question as best as I can, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $33 donation from John Boyer, another channel regular and supporter, who says, does Ukraine have overwhelming momentum with fighting spirit, esprit de corps, and superior designed Western armaments with the Lend-Lease arriving soon? Slava Ukraine, and bravo Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. You two do nice work.
And thank you so much for supporting and enjoying the work we do. And could you reread that one real quick, just so that way I can make sure to wrap my head around how exactly to answer it?
And yes, John said, does Ukraine have overwhelming momentum with fighting spirit, esprit de corps, and superior designed Western armaments with Lend-Lease arriving soon? Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. And to answer that question, yes, they do have the quality over quantity. The Russians have quantity by far, but the Ukrainians have quality. And ever since the beginning of the war, even without the technology being there, they certainly did have the quality to, the quality troops to back up their quantity style weapons, pretty much. And so now with Western weapons coming in, kind of completing the duo in between quality troops and quality equipment, the Ukrainians will have the advantage. They also have high esprit de corps. We've never really seen it falter throughout the course of the war. And a great example of that would be the Battle of Mariupol, which everyone knew pretty much was going to be a losing fight for the Ukrainians from the very start. I had pretty much said that since the beginning of the siege of Mariupol. I said, there's no way that the Ukrainians will be able to break back through. Those soldiers are just buying time, and we never even saw their morale falter, which tells you how good the esprit de corps of the Ukrainian armed forces really is. And just for those of y'all who don't know what esprit de corps is, that's pretty much morale. Their spirits, are their spirits high, is pretty much the question that's being asked when you talk about esprit de corps. And so in those perspectives, I would say that the Ukrainians have the advantage. Right now, however, weather is not on their side. The weather is favoring the Russians' tactics, and we can see that even with the weather favoring them, they're not really able to make a lot of meaningful ground. It took them a month and a half to pretty much advance through one single city, and even after that, their forces have been so far depleted that they had to pretty much instill a pause in the activity in that area to try and regroup their forces to continue on. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the final question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into the last bit of news. But before we move on, I would like to say this. When I said something earlier, I saw some people saying that I broke the golden rule that we have on this channel. And to address that, no, I did not. I was explaining because there was a little bit of a discussion at the beginning of the war that is kind of crucially important to Ukraine, is that this war could have been avoided, and it couldn't have been. The mechanisms were in place for this war to happen. If a certain action was taken, which is Ukraine trying to join NATO, those dominoes were then going to begin falling, and the Russians would pretty much go into war by default, regardless of the situation around the world whatsoever. So it wasn't really supposed to be, and it was not a dive into politics, as more of an explanation that the end result that we see right now would have been inevitable, regardless of the kind of timeline that the world had taken years prior. And so with that, we are going to move on to the final question of the night.
All right. Oh, well, not the final question of the night, but the final one of this segment.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, indeed. Up next, we have a $35 super chat from M.O., who says, "Thank you all for staying cheerful and always getting my spirits up during the war."
And thank you so much for the support, Mo. And of course, we're always glad to try and keep people's spirits up. I always try and keep a chipper tone as much as I can, because while wars are tough, acting like it's doom and gloom would not do anyone any bit of good. And sometimes some people do complain about, not to talk about them too much, but why do you always keep a happy tone? The thing is that if I didn't keep a happy tone, this would really get to me too. And so I like to make sure to go through it. And while it is a war, and of course unfortunate things are happening, I try not to let it bother me too much. And so I'm glad that also comes over to you, and that you're not taking this too bad. The war is, of course, still going on. The Ukrainians are doing incredibly well, considering that... Let me do this real quick. I actually have to know this for myself. 1 divided by 30. So we are still in the 6th month of this war. But to think that we're 6 months into a war, kind of about halfway to the 7th month of this war, and the Ukrainians are still fighting, and the Russians have even collapsed in the entire northern part of the country. The Ukrainians are doing phenomenally well. There's really no reason to act like it's doom and gloom, because they're holding, and that's all that really counts. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and thank you for the kind words about how our show is also helping you to listen to the war news daily and also keep a level head about it. So with that, thank you once again for the support, and we've reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat, we will answer every single one of them by the end of the night, and also if you send in a live chat question, we will answer as many of those at the end of the night as well. And so if you have sent one in, it may be answered. So stick around, and you may be one of the lucky people who does get it answered at the end of the stream. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down into our final segment of news, which will be the Southern Front, Kherson, and the speech from President Zelensky. Starting off in Donetsk, the Russian army is kind of falling apart. It's still, as a matter of fact, as the logistics side of things has never really gotten a break. From the very start of the war, the Ukrainians have made a special beeline to try and destroy Russian logistical infrastructure as best as they can. And we saw one ammo depot explode in Makiivka and also one in Donetsk. Here's the two videos showing those ammo depots go up in balls of flame. Here's the first one showing a Russian ammunition depot on fire in Makiivka. That's the end of the video, and a pretty nice little smoldering fire out there showing us that the Russians will once again have to be outsourcing their ammunition to another supply depot. But it apparently won't be in Donetsk, as the Ukrainians also hit another ammunition depot in Donetsk, and we can see the MLRS fire landing down onto it in this film. See a couple of little flashes. Fun times for the Russians. That's the end of the video, and I just gotta say, it's just pitiful when you really think about it, that the Russians try their best to keep the supply lines running, but there's just no way at this point for them to do that. The HIMARS can practically reach everything that is within Ukrainian-occupied territory at this point, and also, apparently the Ukrainians now have weapons that can reach far into Crimea. And so with that in mind, there's really nowhere that Russian equipment or logistics is safe at all. Everything can be targeted, and everything's a target, and we can see that the Ukrainians are taking full advantage of that fact. Moving on down to the actual front line, where we've seen one small amount of activity near Marinka, we've actually seen a Ukrainian Chechen in combat off of his own camera on his body. And so with that, here's the film of him somewhere in the area outside of Donetsk, we're assuming in Marinka, fighting against the Russians.
Лес. Лес. Лес.
You see him getting his RPG.
Allahu Akbar.
You hear a little bit of machine gun and fire in the distance, and for some reason, is it just me or does this video sound like it's been slowed down a little bit? Because I think it has been. You can see they apparently fired the RPG at some point, but we didn't hear it for some reason. See, they fired the RPG again, but for some reason we can't hear it again. I don't know why. Through the open with the RPG. You can't really see where his hand and the RPG is blocking that a little bit. You now see them firing one of those heavy machine guns that they've improvised.
Идем к нашим, оттуда надо этот хороший.
Now see him looking out into the open. We can see something hid in the distance, but unfortunately we can't really see the Russians in this film, but we can see that a firefight is certainly going down in between the two sides. Sadly, the video paused there at the end, and that's the end of the video. A pretty interesting look at the firefights that are occurring in the Donetsk area right now. But as we speak, there has been no frontline developments in the area. It appears that the Russians are not able to, of course, puncture through pretty much the impregnable fortress that the Ukrainians have built over the past 8 years along this Donetsk front. And the Ukrainians have made small progress pushing into the suburbs of the Kyievsky district about a month ago, but beyond that, we sadly have not heard of the Ukrainians making any more advances into the city of Donetsk itself. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the Donetsk region and more towards the town of Volodymyrivka, where we've seen the Ukrainians destroying some BTR-82s. These cost about $500,000 a pop, so about the price of a pretty high-end Rolls-Royce. You see the Ukrainians taking a look down there. We could also see a BMP-3. And we can now see some Russians wandering around, of course, the straight-line trenches that they always dig. Now the artillery is coming down on them, and it looks like they're not going to be having that fun of a time. We now see the BTR-82 smoking. We can also see the Z's on it, which clearly confirms that that is a Russian BTR-82. And that's the end of the video. It's pretty impressive to see, and I've got to say, quite nice to see the Ukrainians still knocking out Russian vehicles and personnel across the front lines. Moving on further down, and this is something that's wild in a way because you never think about it this way, and I never really do either. But the Azov battalion, one of the Azov battalions, I believe it's the Azov Kharkiv unit, is currently on the southern front around this area. One thing that's wild about this is that this still is in the Donetsk Oblast, and so technically, this Azov unit is in the Donbass, although you would not consider it the Donbass. We consider this the southern front. But here's a video of this Azov machine gunner firing at the Russians from a tree line. Looks like he's got one of those improvised machine guns, I believe. That's the end of the video, and it's good to see that the Azov battalion is still down there and fighting. Moving further on down towards the area of Novoselivka, we can also see some Russian grads being destroyed by the Ukrainians. You guessed it. It couldn't have been anyone else. What do you think it would have been? The Polish? Anyways, here's the video. We can see the grads right there on the tree line, and then we can see them getting hit directly. That was definitely not a miss. That was a dead-on hit to that grad. We now see them burning, and it looks like they're also taking out the entire tree line as well, and now the sporadic rocket is flying off in pretty much every direction. Now we can see a small explosion, if you'd like to call it small, occurring from one of the grads, letting us know that it has certainly been destroyed. And the explosions continue to rocket out of that tree line, letting us know that the Russians are short a couple of more grads. With that, that's the end of the video, and it's still impressive to see that the Ukrainians are knocking out the grads like it's nothing. You would think that counterfire like that would be a little bit difficult to pull off, but of course the Ukrainians, equipped with Western equipment, make it look like nothing. Moving on into the Nova Khakovka area and the Kherson front as a whole, we have seen a picture today that actually made it as the thumbnail because I just thought it was funny. The idea for the thumbnail tonight, and I'll actually show it to y'all on YouTube again just in case if y'all just kind of saw it at a glance. This is the thumbnail right here. Wagner Group is blown away. You can see a Russian general there looking through some binoculars. So we're going to go to that picture, and the plan for that thumbnail was for it to say, insert joke here, because you can make so many jokes about this Russian general and what he's looking at. I would also like to make the quick mention that apparently he is really taking a good look at the flaps that cover the lenses on these binoculars as they are literally in front of the lenses. He can't see nothing, which kind of tells you how competent this Russian general is. Moving on from that fact, also notice the antiques that they're wearing. This guy is wearing a leather crossbelt. He's also wearing leather straps for what may be the binoculars that this general is using. And he could be looking at a lot of things. He could be looking at Russia falling apart right behind him. He could be looking at the Russian airfield that just got blown up the other day. He could be looking at the Ukrainians advancing on his position. He may be trying to find the non-existent Russian army. I mean, he may
be watching McDonald's run away back to the west.
He may be. He may actually see that guy that we saw at Chernihiv single-handedly fighting for the defense of Chernihiv so the McDonald's doesn't get destroyed. He could be looking at a lot of stuff. In fact, he could be trying to see his way around Mr. Lunchtime, or he could be looking for who asked. Regardless of what he's looking for, it was a hilarious picture, and also the fact that the lens covers are still obscuring his vision is probably the whole funniest part of this picture. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the actual frontline news. Starting off at Nova Khakovka, we have heard more explosions resonating from the area of the Nova Khakovka bridge and lock, which we can hear in this video.
Там.
And so that's the end of the video, and I'd also like to make a quick correction that apparently That was Medvedev himself. I actually did not know that, and that's actually kind of funny now, knowing the context behind that. Regardless of wherever he was, I'm highly doubtful he would have wound up in the Kherson area, but regardless of where he was, I think we can all agree that he must be some kind of idiot or something, taking a picture like this, because it's just unbelievable to think that one would be this dumb. So with that, moving on to the next bit of news from the Kherson area, where we have seen the VDV in combat. Ooh, the scary VDV. I wonder what they're doing in Ukraine. They're driving. Showing us the landscape. Off-roading. It's almost like they're having a vacation. Now they're getting off the BTR. Now they're firing into the distance. We can apparently see that this guy is a pirate. That's something new. I've never really seen pirates in the war yet, but I guess the Russians are getting really desperate and they're now pulling on anyone and everyone they can. I mean, you see them continue to fire in the distance, but we don't hear any return fire letting us know that this is a firefight. You now see them firing the ATGM. You now see them firing a shoulder-fired anti-tank rocket. And now spraying into the distance at the supposed Ukrainians again. Although they're not receiving any return fire, and this guy seems pretty comfortable crouching on the edge of the tree line, which would make him a pretty sizable target for rifle fire. This is called wasting ammunition. Some people who are avid shooters here in the United States are wondering, wow, I wonder how they got all of this ammunition, because it's incredibly expensive to shoot anything over here. 22 is now like 20 cents a round. But apparently the Russians just have a whole bunch of surplus ammo. Or they're running out of it, one or the other. Now they drive back off after successfully shooting at the trees and teaching them that they're going to be having none of that leafy nonsense. With that, I guess I
wouldn't want to mess with them.
I gotta say, man, it seems like they have a really big thing against nature. I don't know what their thing is, but they love to shoot at trees. They're the complete opposite of tree huggers. They're tree shooters. With that, we're now moving on to the next bit of location unknown news. Well, not location unknown news, but Kherson frontline news, where we've seen some American MRAPs in Ukraine. Matthew's gonna flip, because out of all of the MRAPs, well, the armored cars we looked at before, this was his favorite, and they're now in Ukraine. Pretty cool to see. But apparently it looks like this one's stuck in mud,
It's
sadly.
stuck.
Yeah.
It's stuck.
He's now saying, okay, pull it forward. And we can see this MRAP's also having a little bit of problem getting traction, trying to pull the guy out of the mud. And you can see that even during the Rasputitsa season, even when it's out of Rasputitsa season, more like, it's still difficult to traverse off-road because you can still get bogged down in the mud. Sadly, it looks like they're in a bit of a bind trying to get this MRAP out of this pretty bad mire, pretty much. But
no, I have to admit, that was pretty silly to drive that through the mud like that, because that is really bad looking mud.
Yeah, it is pretty bad looking mud, but hopefully they can get it out. And gotta say, hopefully that this MRAP doesn't fall victim to the Ukrainian mud like a whole bunch of Russian vehicles have. With that, we are now moving out of this bit of video and on to our last bit of news from the Kherson area, where we saw Ukrainian Su-24 zooming over the open skies, covered in Ukrainian flags. It was a pretty cool little video, and so here it is. You can see it flying into frame. And there you can see it. The drop tanks have Ukrainian flags painted onto them. The rudder has a Ukrainian flag on it. A pretty Ukrainian Su-24. You couldn't mistake it for anything else. You see it continue flying on by. And that's the end of the video. Pretty impressive thing to see that the Ukrainian Air Force is still out there and still owning the skies over Ukraine. With that in mind, we have not heard of any advances here on the Kherson front. We have seen some action, but it isn't suggesting any frontline movements at all. And so with that in mind, we are now moving to our last bit of news for the night. We've gone full circle around Ukraine, all the way from Chernihiv to the location unknowns, from the northern Donbass down to Kherson. And we've now circled all the way back up to the north, to the capital city of Kyiv, to round out our news for the night with a speech from President Zelensky. And so without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 170th day of war.
Українці, українки, короткі підсумки дня. Взяв участь в роботі конференції донорів в Копенгагені. Це 26 держав-партнерів України. Країни Європи, Сполучені Штати, Японія, Австралія, Нова Зеландія. Вони заснували ще один формат на продовження добре відомих зустрічей на авіабазі «Рамштайн». Цей формат про довгострокову підтримку. Це зброя, боєприпаси, тренування військових, розмінування, відновлення на звільненій території. Вже маємо перші результати конференції. Данія одразу по відкриттю зустрічі оголосила про новий пакет підтримки України обсягом 110 мільйонів євро. Загалом конференція зібрала тільки за день 1,5 мільярди євро, які будуть витрачені, в тому числі на виробництво життєво необхідних боєприпасів. До речі, це вагомий плюс до тих кредитних гарантій на 4 мільярди доларів, які були раніше надані Сполученими Штатами, щоб посилити нашу оборонну взаємодію з партнерами в постачанні для української армії. Я дякую всім, хто сьогодні у Копенгагені підтримав Україну, і вірю, що такий формат співпраці прискорить нашу спільну перемогу. У зверненні до учасників конференції я підкреслив, що усім потрібно діяти значно швидше і жорсткіше, і особливо після того, як Росія перейшла до відвертого ядерного шантажу. Те, що відбувається зараз навколо Запорізької АЕС, це один з найбільших злочинів держави-терориста. Сьогодні зафіксовані чергові прильоти російських снарядів.
Hang on. I just saw someone say that this is yesterday's. I want to check that real quick. Production of vital ammunition. That's 50 seconds in. Let me click this one real quick and let me check. 50 seconds
Українці, українки, коротко мільярди євро, які будуть витрачені, в тому числі на виробництво.
That is yesterday's. I will have to go to the president of Ukraine's website. Give me just a second, everyone, so that way I can make sure to pull up the right speech, because now my sources let me down. So, when I saw that, I was like, oh, sweet, someone actually put up the video, and apparently they put up yesterday's and claimed it to be today. So, here's day 170's video, according to the actual website of the off. Wait a minute. This one is also from the 11th. They haven't put out a new video either. Wait a minute, hang on, let me check that again. President of Ukraine. President of Ukraine's office, the videos. Oh my god, they have not put out a new video today. Well, with that in mind, everyone, it looks like we won't be having a speech from President Zelensky today, as there is no speech from President Zelensky as of right. Yeah, that's crazy. We've always had a speech from President Zelensky, but apparently there isn't one today. That's kind of weird. But we can see that all of them are dated the 11th of August, 2022. And so with that, I hate to say it, folks, but it looks like that is actually the end of our news for the night. I thank you all so much once again for watching the news segment. We're about to be moving into the question segment, but if you would like, please make sure to throw down a like on this stream, because it does help us out a lot in the algorithms, and it helps more people to find this news and let them also be informed of what's going on in the war. With that in mind, we're now going to be moving into the question segment and answering as many questions as we can, every single super chat that's been sent in, as well as many live chats as possible. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Man, I hate we didn't have a speech, because now that throws me all off. I feel so weird now not going through the speech and hearing it. We didn't get to hear from the man, the myth, the legend. I can't believe it. But anyways, Up first, we have a poll to address that was put up 18 minutes ago. And the question was, should the world continue to expand on nuclear energy given the extreme danger that they pose in the war? And for those asking that are a little bit more knowledgeable on the topic, I was referring to fission and not fusion, because fusion is not a viable form of nuclear energy just yet. But 49% of you said yes, we should build them anyways. 32% said maybe, but more safeguards. And 20% said no, they pose a threat to humanity. And I actually fall within the 32%. I think there should be always more safeguards. You can't make nuclear energy safe enough. And basically, that's my viewpoint on it. So, Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
And thank you so much for asking. I thought I would never be asked, and I'm just playing. But moving into that, I would have to say that I kind of have to fall into a category that's not up as a poll. It's halfway in between yes and maybe. I believe that nuclear power is the direction of the future, and I think it's a great way to produce electricity. It requires a very small amount of ground to produce the amount that it makes. It's an unbelievable energy producer for the size of ground it takes. However, people being people, people always screw up, and giving them the ability to screw up something that serious, to say the least, is very concerning to me. Specifically concerning, as far as I know about nuclear technology. We may actually have some I guess you could say, nuclear physicists here on stream, and if y'all are on here, please help me to fill in the blanks and correct me wherever need be. But nuclear power is usually conducted, nuclear fission specifically here in the United States, it's usually done with a certain isotope of uranium, which is uranium-235, which is also used in nuclear weapons. And the whole reason why all of our nuclear reactors in the United States run off of uranium-235 is because that's cheaper. We already produce uranium-235 to create our atomic weapons, and so all you have to do is take that enriched uranium and then move it into a nuclear reactor, then starting the fission process and producing electricity. So it's fairly cheap. You don't have to sit there and create multiple different kinds of radioactive materials to produce weapons and electricity at the same time. So with that in mind, I would have to say that I would think that there needs to be a little bit more funding and development put into nuclear technology. Of course, there's the theoretics of the thorium reactors, which are always talked about these days, and they say is incredibly safe. And I think that nuclear technology should advance and progress because I just believe it's the way to the future. It's a great way to produce energy. It produces a large amount of it, and as long as we have a supply of radioactive materials, we can just continue to expand the grid at an untold rate, which is what we will be needing in the future for the kind of projects that the world will be undertaking. And so, as long as we could provide more research and more funding to create safer forms of nuclear energy, I would be more so falling towards the category of yes, and kind of maybe as well. So I hope y'all see what I'm saying. And so with that, we are now going to move on from that poll. And also, please feel free to discuss that in the chat. There is a lot of arguments to be made against nuclear energy and a lot of arguments to be made for it. I would actually be interested to see what a lot of people think. But with that, we are going to be moving on into the question segment. I just saw someone say, it was actually Dundee. He said, nuclear energy is pure stupidity. And I don't really know why it's pure stupidity, but I'd be interested to hear why you think that. But with that, we're on to the questions.
Enforcer, I want to add in one more thing. I always see a lot of people saying that they cannot wait until fusion power is actually viable. But here's my thing. Humans have a way of making weapons out of anything. If we actually make fusion reliable and actually feasible, that just means that there's probably going to be a fusion bomb, which is going to be infinitely destructive. Now, if I'm wrong on that, somebody correct me, but I have a feeling that there will be a fusion bomb that eventually pops up.
So with that, with Matthew's little point in mind, I'd actually like to bring up something else as well. If you look at a lot of nuclear power plants here in the United States, they're... well, not all of them, because that would be a disservice to some people. And I only know specifically about the nuclear power plants here in Alabama, because we tried to make a video on that before, and I heavily researched it. But there's a power plant down here in South Alabama. I believe it's near Eufaula, as a matter of fact, if I remember correctly. It's somewhere near this reservoir. If I can find it. I know it's around here somewhere. Give me just a second, because I know... here it is. the Farley power plant. This is operated by the, I believe, Southern Company, and they have an incredibly good track record here at this power plant. There's in fact been no minor accidents even at this power plant to speak of. It has a spotless safety record and has been running for nearly 50 years. And in fact, it's gotten a license to expend the reactor's life, and they still have no safety record to speak of. It's perfectly fine. However, on the other side of the state of Alabama, up here at the Browns Ferry power plant, they have a safety record that is second to none in how bad it is. They are the only other nuclear power plant rather than 3 Mile Island, and one that's just north of New York City, that has gotten that close to a nuclear meltdown. It's done that several times, and the Tennessee Valley Authority has a pretty questionable safety record with all of their nuclear power plants, and in that regard, that's why I think that safety should be researched a lot more, is that if you put anything under the charge of a person or an organization, there is always the room for them to mess up. And with the Browns Ferry power plant, there has been a lot of mess ups, and they still continue to this day. In fact, when we went up there to film, just a week before we had gone there, there had been a fire on reactor number 3. Just to kind of give you all an idea of how poorly safety is being conducted there. So with that in mind, I would have to say that more research and more funding should be put into trying to make these safer, or snatching these nuclear power plants that are currently being run terribly out of the hands of these very inefficient organizations that are running them, and put them into the hands of someone else, like taking Browns Ferry and just revoking TVA's license to operate it and giving the license to the Southern Company or something like that. Anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on.
And Enforcer, I have one more thing to add. I saw everybody in the live chat saying that the H-bomb is already a fusion bomb. And to my knowledge, it does use a fusion component. However, it's not a pure fusion weapon. And what I was referring to was a pure fusion weapon, meaning the entire weapon itself is primarily based on fusion. So hopefully I'm not saying something ignorant there. That is my understanding. But once again, if I'm wrong, put it in the live chat. But with that being said, we are moving on to our first super chat of the last question segment, which is a $20 donation from Justice Ryan, who says, if there's a major meltdown at a nuclear power plant and radiation threatening thousands or more, will the USA and NATO get involved militarily?
Can you reread that one real quick?
He said, if there's a major meltdown at a nuclear power plant and radiation threatening thousands or more, will the USA and NATO get involved militarily?
They could. If the situation starts to spiral out of control and the Russians don't look like they're going to put a handle on nuclear fallout coming from a power plant, well, really the radiation plume coming from a power plant. I know someone down in the chat, because Matthew and me just know this. If I say fallout, they're going, oh, that's from a nuclear bomb, or something like that. And so, if radiation and the plume of it did extend into NATO countries, and it looks like the Russians were never going to stop it and just let it keep on going indefinitely, the West may step in to try and put a stop to that. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I think, in my opinion. And I thank you so much once again for the support, helping this channel keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops, who says, for the Daily Donut Fund, and also any news on the nuclear plant, it was my understanding that they have a supply of cesium to stop the reactor from meltdown.
And I thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. And to answer that, we sadly haven't gotten any additional news from the Enerhodar nuclear power plant. We'll just keep the map here for reference purposes. As far as we know, there was a fire in the office building. Apparently, it was contained because we haven't heard anything about it since. But considering that the situation is pretty tense there, it may devolve any second. It may also stay stable. We don't really know. Also, to speak about the cesium, I'm not really that big into nuclear technology to know about how cesium works when I guess you could say, being used in a nuclear reactor. And so, unfortunately, couldn't really comment on that, and I can't really tell you for certain whether they have a supply of that there at the Zaporizhzhia power plant. And so, with that, I thank you once again for the support, Snipes. I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from William Arrington, who says, keep up the great work.
And thank you so much, William, for the kind words, and we will try and keep up the great work, and your support will help us to keep doing that. And with that, we are going to move on to the next one. Before we do, I actually saw someone say, why don't we divert the funding that would hypothetically be put into a nuclear power plant into wind, solar, or something else like that. And the reason why I'm not really a big fan of wind and solar is, one, solar takes up a massive amount of land. If you ever look at the amount of land it takes to produce the same amount of energy that a nuclear power plant does, it eats up loads of land. And that's something that I'm not really a big fan of. And on top of that, solar power can be unreliable just depending on the weather. If there is cloud cover, the energy efficiency, well, I guess I could say more like the energy production of those solar panels can be greatly reduced. And a power grid cannot just create energy whenever. It has to create energy directly connected to the demands of the grid. And so if for some reason the Super Bowl is going on in the city and the whole entire thing is connected to I guess you could say, solar panel grid outside of it, and it's a cloudy day when the Super Bowl happens, they may not have enough electricity to stop rolling blackouts from happening in that city. And that's kind of the thing with solar and wind that I don't really like, is that it can't really respond to the direct needs of the grid. Nuclear power can, and on top of that, it also takes up a much smaller area of land to produce unbelievable amounts of power. That's why I'm kind of behind it. And also, just as my thing, and this is my opinion, I think wind turbines kind of break the sight lines, and I think they're unsightly. Yes, they're neat. They were neat at a time. Way back in the day, they were actually really cool to look at. But when you drive through some areas and you just see nothing but wind turbines all over the place, in my opinion, it detracts from the natural beauty of places a whole lot, and I would rather just have all of that energy production be packed into a single nuclear power plant that can power something like 2.3 million homes, instead of tens of thousands of wind turbines that span thousands, if not tens of thousands of acres, can kill tens of thousands of birds, if we're talking about its actual effect on, I guess you could say, the surrounding ecosystem. And on top of that, they break the sight line and kind of make things look, I guess you could say, less picturesque in a way. But that's just my opinion. Anyways, with that, we are moving on to the next question.
And also, folks, I just want to mention real quick, I saw a couple of folks getting very offended about my fusion and fission comments. Just know that I'm speaking from my limited experience, or not experience, limited knowledge of the matter. I'm not a nuclear physicist or anybody who's an expert in the subject, so no need to get too upset because I don't claim to be an authority on the subject. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Scrog CW, who says the garb that Steven Seagal is wearing is because he believes he is a reincarnated Tibetan Lama.
What? Okay, no, that's...
I don't know.
That's just...
I thought it was a Chinese outfit, though.
I thought... Wait a minute, you said Tibetan monk?
Tibetan Lama.
Tibetan Lama.
Like an animal.
No, well, not that kind of llama. There's actually kind of like how there's the Pope. There's this guy in the Tibetan, well, I guess the Tibetan...
He's referring to the Dalai Lama?
Yeah, like the Dalai Lama, I believe, is what he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
And the Dalai Lama doesn't even wear anything close to that. What is he wearing? I mean, what is that? Honestly, I can't even explain what the guy's wearing, because that doesn't even look Tibetan. I don't know. I'd have to go through a lot of Tibetan clothes and see if there's anything like that. There may be. But if he's saying he's a reincarnated Lama... Certainly not, because he doesn't even wear anything like what Steven Seagal is wearing. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and letting us know why he's wearing such a ridiculous outfit.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops, who says, the only truth, Steven Seagal is... Oh, goodness. Psyops, I almost read that off. But I cannot read that off. I think you knew I couldn't when you sent that in. But very interesting comments there. I think the enforcer knows which one I'm talking about, but sadly can't read it off on a stream. But thank you once again for your support of the channel and supporting us through all these good old streams. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Judo2001, who says, okay, I got it. I will be the keeper of the sacred dirty jokes. I will rarely make them, and they will always be funny. Let's see, I'm paranoid here. Let me make sure I read ahead a little bit. We wouldn't want to deny Mr. Lunchtime access to his favorite flavor, but I expect you or respect you enough to keep it rare, okay?
And I thank you very much for supporting, and thank you for respecting why we don't want to air those kinds of jokes on stream. We do want to try and keep up an image here. And while we do crack a joke here and there, we don't want to make the jokes like that. So I thank you very much for understanding that and appreciating that as well. And if they are seldomly said and rarely said, we will, of course, get a good chuckle out of it, but we still may not read it on stream. And so thank you once again for the support, and thank you for understanding once more. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, Dio Split takes a shot at Steven Seagal and puts in a $20 donation to do so. He says, Steven Seagal turned out to be a total loser. Slava Ukraine, and great job, guys.
Well, I thank you for the support, and I gotta say, Steven Seagal really is a total geed. There's no way to explain it otherwise. The guy's just stupid. And the thing to me about him saying that he's a reincarnated llama is that if he was, why didn't he ever feel this way earlier on in life? You know, he didn't, and that's because it's all made up. And so, with that, thank you so much for the support. I see that everyone's taking some pot shots at, well, not really pot shots. They're actually some pretty well-aimed shots at Seagal. And so I thank you once again for the support. I hope that does weigh in on it a little bit. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BL Parak, who says, you guys are doing a great job. Kind of funny that over the last few months, there were several super chats I sent and then fell asleep before they were answered. Nothing important. It's just funny it happened.
Oh, man. Well, I thank you for the support. I hate that you have fallen asleep before we got to answer them. And hopefully that didn't happen tonight. Hopefully you're not asleep right now while we're answering this one. But I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that you did go back and listen to our answers to them, because we answer every single one. And if we miss any, which is incredibly rare and usually takes like an act of God for us to miss one, we always try and go back and make sure to answer them. And so I thank you so much for the support once again. And if you send in support and a question attached to it, it is crucially important to us that we answer them, because you are the only thing that's keeping us running. Everyone who supports this channel is the only thing that keeps this stream running consistently. And so if you did send in a question attached to that, we want to make sure to thank you so much for allowing me to keep on doing what a lot of people believe I do fairly well. And so I always want to make sure that I answer those questions. So if you did send one in, it was important to me. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address tonight's comment, and I hope you're awake and listening to this one right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
And yes, he just said, I'm still awake tonight, LOL.
Yay!
So I'm glad you're awake to hear it. How about that? But up next, we have a $20 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says coal is dying. Letting them keep the Donbass and retaking Crimea with its gas and oil fields. It's possible that Ukraine could go for it, but not if the Russians commit another war crime with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
Well, I thank you for the support, but one thing I would have to say is that coal is, as far as I know, it may not be dying. It may actually be having a little bit of resurgence right now, because the Chinese use massive amounts of coal, and that continues to grow yearly. And the Germans have also kind of found a newfound reason to love coal. And in fact, they have the largest open-air pit in the world where they mine the dirtiest kind of coal you could ever imagine. And that's no exaggeration. There's actually different kinds of grades of coal, and the higher grades burn cleaner. And this is the lowest grade, dirtiest burning coal that there is in the world, that's dug out of these pits here in Germany, right outside of Cologne. But to move from that and try and get some actual statistics, let's see coal consumption worldwide by year. Worldwide coal consumption by year. World coal statistics. There's statistics for this. And we can actually see proven coal reserves. And here's, wow, world consumption of coal in tons. And we can see that we actually burn less coal, in 2000 than we did in 2013, almost by a factor of half. While it is declining right now, it is certainly not to the levels that it was in 1980 and 2000. And it kind of shows you the world that we live in. We think that the world is getting away from coal by and large, and it's using less of it. But the truth of the matter is that we're using more coal now than probably any other time in history. If this graph extended back, you would probably see that the coal consumption was even lower in 1940 than it was in 1980. I don't really have anything to back that up, though, because the graph doesn't go back that far. But we can see that let's see, coal consumption by country. Do they have that? No, they have coal reserves. We can actually see that the United States is the leader in coal reserves in tons in 2016, which is also pretty interesting. But wow. Oh my God. Wow, good Lord, look at this. Apparently, our consumption, I guess so far, is 0.8%. Well, actually, yearly coal consumption is share of total proven reserves. 0.8%, and every year, 99.2% of the coal is left untapped. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much coal there is, and also, it gives you an idea of how far we've moved in terms of industrialization around the world for this much coal to be burned yearly as of 2016. Who knows what this graph looks like as far as 2022 is concerned. So with that, I hope that does address the comment. Coal apparently is not dying at all. In fact, it is growing at an unprecedented rate historically. And with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Captain Chris1220, who says, "How about that Steven Seagal, Don? He's quite the wacko, Don."
Well, thank you for the support and also the funny joke. And of course, I guess Steven, read that part about Steven Seagal again, because I heard Steven Seagal and it all went by in a flash, and then I heard a yeehaw.
He said, "How about that Steven Seagal, Don? He's quite the wacko, Don."
And Don, he is quite the wacko, Don. I would not be surprised if you went down to Chechnya to meet the Kadyrov, Don. But I thank you once again so much for the support, Don. And with that, Don, because I saw this comment in the live chat, Don. It was from Keith. He said the phrase "without further ado" is usually followed by more commentary, period, stop, period. And so without further ado, Don, I would like to say, Don, that I understand your concerns, Don, but without further ado, Don, we're going to move on to the next question, Don. And so with that, on to the next one.
And when you say Don so many times, you have to go out and buy an Adidas tracksuit. It's a requirement.
Yeah, and you have to start squatting everywhere.
Yes, you have to do the Slav squat, as they call it. But up next, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops once again. And let me make sure. Psyops puts in a nice PG super chat this time and says, "Enforcer and Matt, please take this time to praise Susie, the real Ashley, Paul, and Paul too, Junebug, and Matt. Texas bleh." I'm not sure what that meant. But also, needless to say by now, but Donut Fund. And Psyops, thank you for contributing to the Donut Fund. And yes, a big thanks to our Discord crew as well. They do a tremendously good job over there moderating the Discord. And also, they also show up in our live chat and put out notifications about the Discord as well. So a big round of applause for them.
And also, yes, I would like to give a huge thanks to our Discord mod team. They do incredible work. I was actually in a meeting with them today, and it was a pretty good one. It lasted for a while. It was about, I think, an hour long when it got down to it, but still, it was enjoyable to talk to them. The sad thing is, though, is that usually in the middle of the day, I'm just kind of like surviving until the later end of the night, and so I was on there like, yeah, number one rule, and I was like, man, I feel so bad because I try and put as much energy as I can into everything, but at a certain point, I'm like, I have to conserve my energy for other times of the day, like right now. But still, they do an incredible job. And I got to thank them all for it. And I also got to thank some of our viewers like Junebug and everyone else who has just been around and supporting this channel since the dawn of time, pretty much. And so thank you to every single one of y'all once again. If y'all are watching, I just want to say thank you to all of y'all. And thank you so much for your support, Psyops. And also, thank you for supporting that Donut Fund. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Jake Mays, who says, "Answer a random live chat question or comment for meh. I love this segment."
Answer a random one. So, let's see. Let me find one.
So I saw somebody in the live chat say, "What's the difference between here and the Discord?" Well, the big difference is the stream is just temporary. So the live chat stays up just as long as the stream is up, and the Discord is 24/7. So if you want to go in there and chat in different channels, you can do it any time of the day.
Actually, oh, wait, hold on. I just saw SV Jackal say, "I'll pay $200 to see the Enforcer attempt the slave squats." I don't think we want to do that one. I think you actually need to remove the E, and then it'll be good. And then I can do that, because I don't know what a slave squat would be anyways. But moving on from That one caused me so much whiplash. I had to read that one off. It was pretty funny. I'm not beating you over the head though, Jackal. Just know that it was just a funny typo. But moving on from that to actually show y'all what the Discord's about, from my end of things, this is my page that I live on here. And so as we move on through the rest of this, let me show y'all what we've got. So we have our server information. You come on here, and this is a very important bit. If you join the server, this is the only room you'll see, and it's all the rules of the server. Make sure to read these because they're, of course, very important. And then you click that little check mark right there, which verifies you to get into the rest of the server. So then you see the welcome, which welcomes everyone into the server. You see the rules, again, because you got to see them twice. You see the announcements, and I announce every single night when we have streams, and also if we ever get cut out. So there's that. We also see that someone just sent me a message over Discord, which I usually dissuade. But anyways, we can see moderator applications, awaiting interview. We can also see the Ukraine conflict. We have a donate tab where you can donate to different kinds of organizations that are supporting Ukraine in the war. We also have a discussion tab where people are able to talk about whatever they wish as long as this pertains to the Ukraine war. That's what this entire section is for. But we have a whole bunch of stuff like this. We actually have a lot of people in a call right now. We can actually see some people who are on stream in this call, like Ashley, JuneBuck72, Biker.
They've been outed.
Yeah, they've been outed. You are on stream right now, and so congratulations to all of y'all. You're not only in the live chat, you are now actually on my screen that I'm showing to everyone. And then we have a whole bunch of other rooms as well. These are for moderators, but still, that is the Discord. You can find a link to this in the description below. All you have to do is verify yourself on the verification page. Make sure to read the rules and understand what they are. And beyond that, you should be peachy. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. I hope that does explain the difference in between the live chat and the Discord. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And I highly suggest y'all all hop over to the Discord. Our mods love to see new people come in. And I also love to know that more people are joining the Lee Spring Army and getting involved in what we do. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a very generous 1,000 Swedish krona donation. I think that's how you say the currency, which roughly translates to a $98 super chat from Rope Access Work, who says Putin started the war because he is afraid that democracy will spread to Russia. He is not afraid of NATO because he has nuclear weapons. He cannot use nuclear weapons against Russian democracy. A question. Can all American actors recognize shrapnel from HIMARS?
Yes, in fact, that's something that's naturally innate in actors that go to Hollywood. Usually during auditions for movies, like the kid who was in the movie E.T., Steven Spielberg asked that kid, "Tell me, kid, what's this?" And he slid some metal in front of him, and that kid said, Gee Willikers, that's some HIMARS material. And Steven Spielberg said, "My God, he's going to be the next A-list actor." And so, yes, they all can spot HIMARS material, just to answer that part of the question. To answer the next part, let's see. Putin started the war because he's afraid that democracy will spread to Russia. I don't really think that, in my opinion, is the reason for the start, because they're playing a really big game. And that game is the strategic situation of Russia in the world stage. Considering that they want their own sphere of influence, that has a lot to play with why they try and still play games in Eastern Europe with who is doing what. But then again, it could also be that he's trying to stop democracy from spreading into Russia. He's not afraid of NATO because he has nuclear weapons. He is afraid of NATO because nuclear weapons do dissuade NATO from doing a lot of stuff that they would do to Russia otherwise. But at the same time, in a conventional war, the Russians would get smacked, and the nuclear weapons, all that does is mutually assure NATO's destruction along with theirs. And so he is, in my opinion, afraid of NATO in a way for that reason. So with that, he cannot use nuclear weapons against Russian democracy. That's true. A question, can all American actors... Oh, and we already answered that part. And so with that in mind, I thank you so much once again for the support. That was a massive amount of support. And also, I just want to make sure... SEK to US dollar, it is a Swedish krona. I just want to make sure it was a krona, because I was like, is it or is it not? But I do thank you so much for the support. It's cool to know that we do have viewers in Norway. That's why I was checking. And it's really cool to know that you're up there. So I don't know where you're from. Are you from Oslo? Are you from Bergen? Are you from one of the smaller towns in Norway? Are you from Skarsvåg? Are you?
Who?
Skarsvåg. It's this little town up here that I just saw. It's like, let's actually take a look at that town. I don't know if you're from Skarsvåg. but I'd like to take a look at it and see what it is. So it's a small little town. It's tiny. I mean, like, it's literally microscopic. But apparently Google Street View did make their way up here in 2010. And it's literally just snow. And some houses. Pretty neat. But anyway, so that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope we were able to answer every bit of that question. Support like that helps this stream to keep on running. And I gotta thank you so much for helping us to keep doing what we do. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Lisa Dreyer, a $15 super chat from Stefan R., and a $14 super chat from Adrian Craciun, I think, hopefully. But thank you to all three of you for your support. Now, y'all don't leave comments, but you leave support to the channel, and that means a lot to us. So thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we are moving on to the next one. And just so everybody knows, we have about 32 super chats to get to, so we have quite a large number tonight. So up next, we have a $12 super chat from UberCon, who says, pineapple chicken pizza is good, but Greek pizza is the best. Beep boop. And UberCon, I would really like to ask, what is the beep boop? Where did that come from?
I don't know where it came from either. It's just kind of like he started it on his own. But still, that actually sounds kind of good. Pineapple chicken pizza? Barbecue chicken pizza? I think I would have to try that, you know, because I never throw anything out. I always like to try everything before I pass judgment. So I'd have to check that out. And Greek pizza, I've never had that before, so I'd have to try that out as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And beep boop. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next are, actually, let's see, 4 decoders tonight. WF2U. Oh, yes.
Wait a minute. I got to correct something here. We went to Norway for the Swedish krona, and I just realized that that's Swedish krona from Sweden. And I just had an absolute brain fart when I was talking about that. So you're actually not from Norway. I'm sorry about that rope access work. You're actually from Sweden. And that needs to be changed right now. So sorry about that, everyone. Apparently, my synapses were not firing, and for some reason, I mistook Sweden for Norway. So with that, we are going to move on to the next one now, and I'm sorry for that little bit of a hiccup.
And real quick question, who made the Lego? Was it Norway?
It was actually Denmark. Denmark was the one who made the Lego.
Oh, man.
Which I believe in Danish means let's play.
It does, actually. I think so. I think I heard James May say that on a documentary somewhere. But anyways, up next, we have our 4 decoders of the stream, WF2U, Cife, Ashley, and Mark Hodges. And WF2U, once again, put in that $10 super chat. And they said, excuse me, I'm just absolutely stuttering right now. I think the busy or the cold brew wore off pretty quick tonight. But the question or statement was, the first Morse code is coordinates to Kievsky Station Square, Moscow, Russia. Morse code says 1,000 Russian commanders is pretty high.
And that was a pretty straightforward observation in the Morse code. And also, yes, that coordinate did mark that train station in Moscow, and ding-ding-ding-ding, you were correct. I was just trying to put down a different marker tonight somewhere else, and so I decided to put one the Kievsky railway station in Moscow, just really for no other reason rather than to just do it. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Congratulations on deciphering both of those Morse codes, and now I can see people in here who want to act like... And here's something that's always funny, is that people come here every night for war analysis, and also for the information I give about the war and sometimes other things outside of the war in Ukraine. And yet here we go with the people who are seething and always look at something to try and hit the Americans. So we have one person here, Inquisitor, saying Americans have a problem with European geography. Jeez. I guess he wasn't around for the time during the question segment I used to do quizzes, and I would get almost every single European country correct. But man, oh man. Once you do something wrong, people will try and kick your forehead in over it. But anyways, with that, we made the correction. I've had a little bit of a mess up. Obviously, Norway is not Sweden, and Sweden is not Norway. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, "Good work, guys. And did the Ukrainians modify some of their weapons to be able to reach into Crimea, or they didn't destroy all their long-range weapons back in 2012?
I would say that the Russians did not destroy all of Ukraine's long-range weapons back in 2014 2014 to 2022 as of the present day, and the Ukrainians may have been able to produce some FRIMs, or a lot of FRIMs, that are operational, and they're just trying to figure out how to sparingly use them but cause the highest amount of damage because of it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question, because I don't think the Ukrainians have been able to modify their currently existing weapons to reach out that far. I think that's something that has been domestically made at this point. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Captain Black Jack Honor, who says, I, Earl Grey, is Lord Haw Haw 2.0. Look him up. Expatriated Brit in St. Petersburg spewing Russian propaganda. I'm not really sure who that is.
So just in case if y'all don't know, here is Lord Haw Haw. Lord Haw Haw had a little bit of haw haw when he got shot in the balls by a British soldier after he was trying to hide from them for a long time, because this is one of pretty much Britain's most wanted men when they were entering Germany, is that they were looking for this guy, because he was saying some pretty nasty stuff on German radio pretty much the entirety of the war. So with that in mind, I would have to agree he is certainly the modern day version of Lord Haw Haw 2.0. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Duke Savage, who says, under what circumstances do you think NATO might get involved in the war at this point? I agree. We need to speak to the Russian people. They are not their government, in my opinion.
To address that question, did he ask when NATO should step in? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
He says, under what circumstances do you think that NATO should get involved?
I think that NATO should only directly step in if they are getting threatened themselves through actual military action. For example, if the Russians made a small border incursion in Poland, that would lead to NATO getting directly involved. Beyond that, there really is no way for NATO to get offensively involved where they could take action to preemptively attack the Russians or get involved, because the NATO charter doesn't make any kind of considerations for that stuff. So in that sense, they would really have to wait until something happened to them to be able to turn around and respond in kind. So with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, and I thank you very much for the support, because that's really when I think NATO should get involved, as if they are being directly attacked. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug with the 72 on the end, who says, good evening and happy Friday. Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, LSA Strong.
And thank you so much for the support, and also Slava Ukraini. And thank you very much for helping us to keep this stream running, because without y'all, it would not be possible. And so, thank you once again for the support and giving us some kind words of support and encouragement. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Kimberly Brokaw, who says, on behalf of 78 Money Pit, can't put a price on life experience.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, 78 Money Pit's been around for quite a long while. And if that's on his behalf, I thank both of y'all for the support. And also, thank you so much for being longtime Lee Spring Army veterans and being around and watching this news and helping us to keep on covering it as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And just something I realized, 78 Money Pit, if you were still in the chat, I think I just figured out why you call yourself 78 Money Pit. Do you have a 1978 car that requires a lot of repairs, or you put a lot of mods on it? I have a feeling that's why you call yourself that. But if I'm right or wrong, let me know. But up next, we have a $10 super chat from Molosky80, who says, American Ukrainian here. Hope my hometown of Donetsk is salvageable after this war, and Slava Ukraine.
And hopefully it will be. It seems that it's pretty much survived intact past 2014. And if the Ukrainians do have to fight through it, knowing the Russians, they'll probably level the whole town to try and stop the Ukrainians from taking it. But, you know, who knows? I do thank you very much for the support. And it is interesting to hear that that is your home city of Donetsk, which is currently right now in pretty much a quasi-state inside of Ukraine. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support. I do hope, too, that there's not a lot of damage that happens to Donetsk during this war when the Ukrainians eventually try to retake the city through pretty much a pitched battle. If the Russians are that bad off, it probably won't be a pitched battle. It'll probably just be the Ukrainians just walking through. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And I hope I was able to address that comment fairly well.
And I just saw 78 Money Pit say, yep. And that was just a totally wild guess, but I'm happy to know I was right because that just happened to be a lucky guess. But anyways, up next we have an $8 super chat from Mech Tactical, who says not even a double whiskey and cider will get Seagal barf staying out. Mr. Lunchtime versus Seagal versus Tyson and Dana White and Joe Rogan officiate. LOL.
Interesting. I think that if all of those guys were put in a ring, Mike Tyson would probably beat Steven Seagal. Mr. Lunchtime would trip and fall on Mike Tyson, taking him out, and then Joe Rogan would probably start talking about elk meat or something like that. So if that's the way it went, I wouldn't be surprised. But I do thank you for the support, and that would be an interesting little scenario right there if all of them did get put in the boxing ring together with Joe Rogan and the other person, I don't know who exactly they are, but officiating outside the ring. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and also the interesting commentary right there. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have another super chat, this time from Captain Blackjack Honor, once again, who puts in a $7 donation and says, as to Wagner versus Blackwater, to quote someone famous, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if Blackwater is there, all good by me.
Well, I thank you for the support, and I don't know if Blackwater is there or not. I'm assuming they're not. But in certain situations, you do usually overlook some things like that and just let it slide. I actually saw someone in the comments way early on say, I guess you don't remember that Russia, the Soviet Union, was our ally in World War II. And that was really more of an alliance of convenience. It wasn't because we loved them, because everyone pretty much knew that that alliance would fall apart right after the war, much like the Germans and the Soviets alliance broke up right at 1941. So with that, I do thank you for the support, and I would have to say, can you reread that one for me real quick so that way I can make sure to wrap this up pretty well?
And yes, they said, as to Wagner versus Blackwater, to quote someone famous, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if Blackwater is there, all good by me.
And I would have to, and now, so that way I know how to wrap it up, I would have to say that if Blackwater was there, I would let that slide by and large if they were fighting for Ukraine, but not really. That's kind of a little bit of a tough line for me to cross, is that would you let another group of pretty much war criminals fight for the Ukrainians, because then that kind of brings them down to the level of the Russians. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you very much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Stefan R., who does not leave a comment. But Stefan, thank you very much for your support and being with us for a very long time. And up next, we have a $7 super chat from NOYDB, who has been around for a very long time as well, who says, if I can't get you to watch Stripes and the Escape from Russian Soldiers, at least listen to the soundtrack by Elmer Bernstein. Listen for a little homages to work in Magnificent Seven.
And thank you so much once again for the support, and I will try and check out that music. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to listen to music these days, but I would love to listen to some of that, because it does sound like something that might be in my genre. I'm kind of more of a military music kind of person, not marching cadences. I mean, like, if some people are into marching cadences, yes, but I'm not really one of those people. You know, I kind of find the whole all day, all long, you know, that kind of stuff. It gets the whole unit moving and keeps them in pace, but at the same time, I just find marching music to be a lot more refined, in my opinion, and I just like it really for that reason. And also, marching music is always a whole lot more jolly than there's a yellow bird, a yellow head. You know, I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that kind of was cheesy to me when I was in school, because we had to sing it, and of course, when you're in JROTC, these kids, these teens are out to prove themselves, and so they have to try and find the edgiest cadences, and they can't even march in step. And then, you know, you're singing these silly songs with everyone out of step, and I don't know. I just always found it a lot better to just have marching songs instead. I don't know why. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope I was able to address that comment at least a little bit. And with that, we will make sure to check out that music. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from WL, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for your support of the channel. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Smart Lucker, who says, just wanted to pop by and say hi before I get busy. Y'all didn't read my super chat from yesterday, but no hard feelings, and take it easy tonight, guys. And Smart Lucker, I think I read a super chat from you yesterday, but if I didn't, we did have quite a bit of chaos. So my apologies if I didn't see it. And also, if I ever miss it, feel free to let me know in the live chat, and I will always make sure to try to catch it before the stream ends. But thank you very much for your support once again.
And also, I thank you very much for your support as well. And I hope, and I'm glad that there is no hard feelings, because unfortunately, last night we had a lot of issues on Matthew's end with his microphone and everything like that. And we were trying to fix them. And so I think some super chats came in and Matthew was not able to catch them. And if that was one of them, I'm very sorry about that. And we will make sure, we of course try our best to get every single one of them. And I think that would be one of the only two times I can remember where that happened. But I do thank you very much for the support. I hope we were able to address this one fairly well tonight, and we will make sure to keep an eye out for them in the future. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Ash Scott, who says, Seagal will never appear in TikTok Battalion videos because he can only be filmed in landscape.
Oh man, that is a roast.
That was a low blow. That was a low blow.
That was a low blow. And yeah, I mean, like Steven Seagal, he probably would never show up there anyways, because he believes in special kind of martial arts where he doesn't have to move, but his enemies just kind of, fall over. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Applesauce Man, who says more like Steven Seagal.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
You there?
Yes.
Was that the end of the super chat?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I was sitting there thinking, I was like, did he cut out? But I thank you very much for the support, and I guess you could say he is more like a seagull. I would make the sound of a seagull, but I wouldn't even try because I wouldn't be able to. So with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope we were able to address that comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from the Squad Guy, who says Seagal will make a film about the war, and it's that bad that even the Russians will disown him and will find his bad shirt wearing, you know what, in North Korea.
Reread that so I
Hello?
can process that.
All right, so they said Seagal will make a film about the war, and it's that bad that even the Russians will disown him and will find his bad shirt wearing you know what in North Korea.
Oh man, that's a pretty bad roast. And see, Steven Seagal, just in case y'all didn't know, I'm sure y'all do, but he makes terrible movies. I've seen clips of them on YouTube, and they all just look terrible. Even the older ones when he was actually kind of filming here in the United States. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for the incredible roast, and I don't even think the North Koreans would take it, because a man of that size, only one man can exist like that in North Korea, and that's Kim Jong-un. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. Hope we were able to address that comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have, hold on just a minute there. I flipped my spreadsheet upside down. There we go, got it fixed. Up next, we have a $10 super chat from our channel legend, Jay Bagwell, who says, breaking news, Chuck Norris goes to Ukraine, meets Steven Seagal on the battlefield. Seagal was killed by heart attack when Norris took his shirt off to fight.
Well, that's a pretty good one, actually. And I thank you very much for the support, Jay Bagwell. And that is the first time in a while that we've actually had a Chuck Norris joke. I remember Chuck Norris jokes used to be a huge thing back in the early 2010s. That was something that even kids in school made jokes about. Sadly, it kind of went out of style, but I'm glad that you're bringing it back, Jay. And also, that is fairly true. Chuck Norris can do some pretty crazy stuff. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, Jay, and thank you very much for helping us to keep this channel running. And with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope I was able to address that one fairly well.
And up next, we have another super chat from Psyops, who puts in a $10 donation and says, the best state in the nation is Oklahoma. This is my honest opinion. Yes, Matt, I think that. And Psyops, I have nothing against Oklahoma, so if you think that's the best one in the nation, that's fine with me.
Well, I don't have anything against Oklahoma because apparently they have a town called Hennessy. Where do you live? I live in Hennessy. Like, the drink? No, the town. Let's look at Hennessy. Goodness me. I would have to have some Hennessy. It actually looks like a normal American town. I'm not ratting on it that bad. It looks like the town I came from, but it's got a really wide street. Also, an interesting fact I found out today watching YouTube. Did y'all know that apparently there is a town in Idaho called Soda Springs right here, and there's actual carbonated water that is naturally forming that comes out of the ground right there at Geyser Park. Really cool, honestly. I think that's like the coolest thing I found out over the course of today. And it was so cool, I was like, maybe I can make a video on that. But then again, someone already made a video on it. That's why I watched it and found out about it. But that was a really cool one. Anyways, with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does weigh in on it. And also, real quick, just to kind of show y'all something, speaking of Soda Springs, nothing against Oklahoma, but it's really flat. And if you go to a place like Idaho, there are some mountains out in the distance. We've actually driven through here before, and it's a beautiful place, really. Not the specific part of the road, but the mountains in the distance are. And so, that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, Psyops. And if Oklahoma is your favorite state, I'm not going to stop you from thinking that. I think Alabama's the best, but, you know, I'm kind of biased. So with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And just to give everybody a heads up, we have about 25 super chats left until we get to our live chat questions. So stick around, and it's just right around the corner. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Psyops, once again, who says, "Did you know that Oklahoma has a submarine? Look up Muskogee War Memorial."
I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee. Let's pull that up real quick. Muskogee, Oklahoma. There it is. Let's see if we can find it now. Oh, let's see. Arrowhead Mall. That's the largest landmark in town. Three Rivers Museum. Okay, we're not looking for that right now. We are looking for the War Memorial. Muskogee Parks and Recreation. Nope, it's not there. At least it doesn't look like it. Was that it? Nope. Nope, that's a building. Let me just type that in, actually. Muskogee War Memorial. Home of the USS Batfish. Well, you would just have to be absolute batfish to like this war memorial. Let's drop down there and see a picture of this.
And there's the batfish.
I think, yep, that's the batfish. Man, I can't believe it's actually called the batfish. But that's actually kind of crazy. I think this is the exact same class of submarine that's at the USS Alabama's War Memorial Park. Let's see if they have pictures of the inside, and I can kind of tell you if it is or isn't. It might be a little different, actually, to come to think of it. Maybe just a little. I like how there's a computer screen in a submarine from the 40s. Let me go to Alabama real quick, and let me see if that's the same kind. Let's see here. It should be right there. There it is. And there's the submarine here, the USS Drum, and I think they are the same. Let's look at the stern, and let's see. I think it is. I'm not exactly sure. This is a, I'm not going to go through the specifics of submarines because I don't really know them all too well. But I do thank you for the support, and I do thank you for letting us know about that absolutely batfish fact. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, Psyops.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Edgy Number 1, who says, "Crimea attack was UAF Special Forces operation. It reminds me of SAS tactics. UAF may have missiles, but can't defy the laws of physics. Explosives were planted."
And I thank you very much for the support, but I still think that this is a fact that's kind of up in the air, and we don't really have a lot of confirmation to say whether it was a missile or not. Some people are actually saying that the Ukrainians have come out and said that it was a missile of Ukrainian origin. And so I'm not exactly sure if it would have been or not. You know, to think that they were able to get onto the airfield without causing massive chaos in the process, like a firefight or anything like that, is a little bit tough to wrap my head around and think that that would be feasible. But I do thank you very much for the support. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I think it's highly unlikely, and it was probably more so a missile attack. So with that, I hope that does address the comment in a way, and I thank you very much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Bob Perrin, who says, "What are the red polygons on your map? What is the blue polygon near Odessa?
The blue polygon represents a naval invasion that's a bygone relic of a time long ago, and we actually thought that Odessa could be invaded navally. We could honestly get rid of that, and it wouldn't really change anything. The red area is about partisan activity. We think there's a decent amount of partisan activity in this area based off of video evidence, but we haven't gotten a lot of video evidence from this specific area to corroborate for that for a while. It seems like partisan activity is kind of spread into the entire southern area of the Russian occupation. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat once again from Bob Perrin, who says, Matt, it is Bob Perrin. Let's see, Bob Perrin. Yeah, I think I've been saying it right. And he says, and here's another $5 for you, if not for a gym membership, then for something fun. Enjoy, we love your work. And Bob, apparently you didn't believe me yesterday when I said something about the gym. But yes, it's always good to hit the gym occasionally. But thank you very much for the support once again, and thank you for the kind words also. And also, thank you for being a Leaf Spring Army member for a very long time. And also, to recognize you once more, we have another $5 super chat from you, and he doesn't leave a comment in that one. So once again, as I said, thank you very much for the support. And also, big shout out to Robin M. for putting in a $5 super chat without a comment. Thank you for your support as well. And we're back to Bob Perrin again, who puts in another $5 super chat and says, fission is the best. Without it, we wouldn't have all the giant monster movies from the 1950s, and Japan wouldn't have Godzilla.
That's pretty true. I would have to agree with that. Fission's pretty interesting, pretty cool, but it does have some drawbacks. But I do thank you very much for support. That is a true fact that if it wasn't for nuclear fission, we wouldn't have Godzilla. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again so much for the support, because you've sent in a dozen of those. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Lisa Dreyer, who says, how are the grain ships getting through the Black Sea when supposedly mined?
Apparently they're being guided through the minefield, or the Russians have told them how to pass through without slamming into mines. I'm not exactly sure, but I would believe logically that that would be the best reason as to why they're making it through the minefields without slamming into one. And so with that, I thank you very much once again for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on, we have a $5 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says, when Seagal sees Putin. So BSG Wolf, you almost got me on that one as well. Sadly, I can't read that one off on stream. I think it would be a little too out there to read off live, but I'm sure everybody else got to see it in the live chat anyways. So thank you very much for your support of the channel and also being around for a very long time. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Laszlo Uriel, who says, fusion could be a big centralization of energy production and concentration of power. Plus, it becomes a single point of failure and thus a giant target.
Is he talking about nuclear fusion?
Yes, fusion.
I would assume that those are fairly good points. Once again, I'm not a nuclear physicist, so I don't know everything there is about nuclear power. But by and large, as a layman, in my understanding of it, I do think that it is the direction forward in terms of massive power production for the burgeoning energy needs of a modern age. It's something that I actually think a lot about is nuclear power, because considering that a lot of things are going electric, the amount of electricity consumption is going to be incredibly high. As a matter of fact, let's pull up this. How much energy does an acre of solar panels produce? So 1 acre of solar panels produces about 351 megawatts of electricity. 351 megawatts of electrical energy per year. So let's pull up how much energy does a nuclear power plant produce per year, which this is. So we can see here that 1 acre of solar panels produces 351 megawatts per year. A single nuclear power plant, this one, let's actually pull that one up, the RE Gina, so that way we can get an idea of how many reactors there are, and then we can divide the figures down from that. Units operational, one unit apparently is in this power plant. That's it. Nuclear power plant. It is a single unit. So one nuclear reactor of this specific make, it's a Westinghouse 2-loop PWR, which is a pressurized water reactor, produces that much electricity over the course of a single year. And that's at 93% of its capacity. And so if we did an acre of solar panels, 1 acre, and let's do the math here. So this one reactor produces 4.727764, and then we divide that by 351. You would have to have 13,469 acres worth of solar panels operating at maximum efficiency all year round with no cloud cover whatsoever to produce the kind of electricity that a single nuclear reactor can produce over the course of a year. And also to put into perspective how big is 13,500 acres. Let's see how big that would actually be. Well, thank you so much for the answer to that, Google. Let's see if we can get an answer to that here on the ground. If we can draw out a little outline and see the shape. So let's see here. We'll just do this real quick and see if it gives us a figure. So this is 3.1 square miles of ground, which is not an acre. Wait a minute, 3.1 square miles. 3.1 square miles to acres. That's only that's only 1,900 acres. So let's go back to that map. Wait a minute, hang on. We can actually put this in straight up and figure out how many square miles of ground that would be. So let's go to here. Put in 13,469. So you would have to have 21 square miles of solar panels to produce the same energy that a single nuclear reactor with the amount of ground it takes up produces per year. So let's go back to the map and let's draw that out and show you how big that solar field would have to be. So let's see here. We'll go like this and then like this. Once again, this is a really rough estimate. We don't even know if this will equal 21 square miles. 25.1 square miles. So it's close enough. So let's zoom out. And you can see how big that solar panel field would have to be to produce that kind of electricity. And then the question is, how much power is a megawatt? How much power is a
megapint?
A megapint is a megawatt.
That's helpful.
Yes, a megawatt hour equals 1,000 kilowatts. Well, what does that do? One megawatt of power is enough for about 330 homes.
No, that's more helpful.
Okay, so 1 megawatt, a single megawatt, and this produces 4.7 million of them. And so let's cut that number down. So 4,727,764 times 330. That means that single nuclear power plant is able to power wait a minute, that number seems off. Let's go back. Enough electricity. 330 homes during 1 hour. You know, I'm going to have to end the computations there because this number is pretty high, but according to the numbers, that nuclear power plant could sustain 1.5 billion homes over the course of a single hour. But I feel like those numbers are off because the Browns Ferry power plant only powers around 2.2 million homes. And so this number is probably pretty far off. But still, that kind of gives you an idea of how much ground it would really take in solar panels to produce the same amount that a single reactor is able to produce. And then think about the amount of ground that takes up. So anyways, with that, we are on to the next question. I hope we were able to look into that one pretty well.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Junebug without the 72 on the end. So thank you very much for your support of the channel and watching for a very long time. And up next, we have yet another super chat from Bob Perrin, who puts in a $5 donation and says, the enforcer said, weigh in on Steve Seagal. That's quite the gravitational anomaly.
That's a pretty good play on my words right there, and I gotta say, that was a pretty good joke. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and also weighing in with a pretty good joke. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 $5 super chat from David Moyers, who says President Zelensky has been confined to the bathroom after seeing Steven Seagal's interview. Diarrhea is very contagious.
Oh, man, people have been throwing in roasts on Steven Seagal tonight. I gotta say, like, they've never stopped, actually. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And another pretty good joke. That was actually a pretty solid one, too. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from SB65, who says, Chocolate Eclairs Fund. Thanks for the work you lads put in. Only thing is, the 3 a.m. start time is killing me. Northeast Lincolnshire, UK. And I have to say, you stay up at 3 a.m. to watch the stream. You are the biggest legend on the channel if you do that.
Lincolnshire. I gotta make sure we get this place correct. Northeast Lincolnshire. Oh, buddy. You shouldn't have said that. Oh, he's close to Hull. Oh.
Oh, not that place.
Oh,
I don't like
no.
Hull.
I would be anywhere but Hull. But we just ratted on Hull. I'm sorry to anyone who lives in Hull if y'all are watching. But
they probably agree. They probably agree.
They probably agree. I don't think anyone wants to live in Hull. But let's drop down into this town here and let's see what Northeast Lincolnshire looks like. You know, it's kind of like the United States. Every single town in Britain has kind of the same look in a way, and a lot of American towns do, but I would say this is about the British look. And also notice how the streets kind of just do their own thing. They don't really have a standard width like here in the United States because they just kind of evolved through the Middle Ages in some places, and so they just kind of varied in widths with whatever the town required. But still, really interesting place. I don't know if this is the exact town you're in, but still, Northeast Lincolnshire, pretty nice. You also have Lincoln and the Lincoln Cathedral, which we've talked about before in length on stream, and I won't do that again just for the sake of time. But I do thank you so much for the support, and we are going to put those towards chocolate eclairs. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And I see that a lot of people are actually agreeing with us that a lot of people do not want to live in Hull. Apparently, that's just a universal fact of life that Hull is the worst place on Earth. It may be the pit of civilization itself. But I don't want to go that far because there is a place that is far worse than that. There's a place not too far from where we live that is pretty bad. Detroit. And so that.
And Enforcer, I just saw SB65 say, I'm in Grimsby, not Hull.
Oh, Grimsby. All right, so now that we know where you're from, let's go to Grimsby. I'm sorry, we have to know. Grimsby, here it is. I was thinking you may be from here because it's more populous, but still. Let's take a... Wait a minute. This is on the other side of the Humber, which I remember Matthew made a lot of fun of me when we were on the vacation over there, and we were driving to Hull. I said, oh, look, it's the bridge over the Humber River. It's the Humber Bridge. And he said, what idiots would name a river Humber? Well, look who's laughing now. But anyway, it's getting to Grimsby. Let's drop down in here and see what the main road through town looks like. All right, so we start off with a building that looks like it comes from 1984. Very nice. We have the B&M Home Store. Pretty interesting. And I gotta say, the main road looks interesting. That looks like a church over there. And by and large, it just looks like another British town, but pretty neat. And I thank you very much for sharing with us where you're from. Let's drop over to one of the I guess neighborhoods over here. This whole entire town looks fairly new, actually. Like, it looks like it was made in the 60s. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and also letting us know where you're actually from. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
And I just saw Karen Vaughn say in the live chat, they drive on the wrong side of the road too. And yes, they do. And we actually rented a car when we were over there and drove around. And it wasn't that bad for the first part, but when we got over to, I think it's the Cornwall Coast, I think it's called, on that side of the country, the roads get extremely narrow out there, and everybody drives like 70 miles an hour down these little small roads that are barely big enough to fit two cars on them. And it was like, it felt like being on a racetrack. I've never seen anything like that. And the people in Britain will drive 70 down those little small narrow roads where you can barely fit two cars on them, and everybody will be hugging like right up next to a wall. It's like they put right on the road, basically. You know what I'm talking about in Force? Just like the wall's like right on the road.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And there's this one video that kind of summarizes how driving on British roads is, and I've got to find that and show that to y'all real quick. And I know this is adding a little bit of time to stream, Matthew, but I bet when you see this video, you'll understand why. So let's see. Very British car crash. Here we go. This is it.
Are you film?
Oh God, it's an ad.
Oh, nasty.
Nasty. We don't do ads on here. Anyways, this is the stone wall he's talking about. They're all over Britain, but this is what you feel like they'll do to the car at every given second.
That was like how fast they were driving too. Oh God. Oh man.
Well, that was fucking scary.
Oh my lord.
Dear. I'm
He climbed right out too. What's he? He's wearing a GoPro?
I guess. I don't know. I mean, like,
why was he wearing a GoPro?
I don't know. But what the crazy thing is that they got cattle out there in that field, and they haven't gone over this wall. I mean, like here in the United States, we have these kind of like higher electric fences. They go to about the waist height, and that's how we keep our cattle in. But apparently, y'all can just keep them in with what looks like a 3-foot tall stone wall. I'm pretty impressed by that. Don't get me wrong. That's actually really cool. And someone said, is that Hadrian's wall? No, that's just a normal wall. And I like how this guy is getting out of the car, and it's very British to say things like this in a way, because when we were over there, people say stuff like this, like, are you trying to insult me? And they could be saying something like, you're just an idiot. And they'd be like, are you trying to insult me? And this guy's getting out, and he's like, I'm uninjured. I'm uninjured.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
right,
uninjured. I'm uninjured. Let me.
Not sorry.
Okay, no anger, no anger. Let's just.
I'm sorry.
Let's just take this calmly.
The whole thing was pretty funny. But honestly, British people are really cool. We went over there, and the British and the Americans have a thing where it's like a kind of like a love-hate thing where you got to joke on each other a lot. At least that's what we experienced when we went over there, and everyone kind of gets a good laugh from it. But still, I see that the British people in our live chat are having a fun time with this. And I've seen so many people saying some interesting stuff. British roads are so narrow, it's a joke. I would die on a British roundabout. We almost did multiple times. We actually had a golf ball thrown at us on one of them. We know how to drive in the UK. Steve Lewis with a Welsh flag representing Wales, which is really cool. And I mean, like, in a way, y'all gotta know how to drive over there. You're gonna be getting crashes all the time. But with that, I hope we've kind of talked about British roads a little bit. And so, we're on to the next one, and I hope y'all have enjoyed that little aside.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from William Devereux, who says, thanks for everything y'all do, and much love. And William, thank you very much for your support of the channel. Sadly, we would comment further, but we're starting to run a little low on time, I just realized. So up next, we have a $3 super chat from NOYDB, and we actually have 4 in a row, which I'm going to combine into one. So NOYDB said, pro bass is hard. Let's see. It says something in Ukrainian, which means where are you from? #1 song to play on Ukraine videos. And he also said, did you see that clip yesterday of Russian reactive armor captured tank? They opened it up and it was just rubber inside. And if you like Remington, have you considered the new Remington Argon? And as a recreator, do you have a rebel yell?
I don't have a rebel yell. I haven't actually done a lot of Civil War reenacting. Really any for that matter. It's usually like cowboy stuff. But it's been really cool to hear the stories of the reenacting group when they do it. And you know, they've wanted me to move into that category, but it's a really hard one to do because either you have to lend everything from everyone, and usually there's so many people going that need lended stuff, there's not enough to go around. But I don't have a rebel yell of my own, sadly not. But the other thing about the Remington Argon, I have not heard about that. I'll pull that up real quick. Remington Argon, apparently. I can't find that right now in a quick search, so sadly I'll have to pass on that part. And to address the last part, well, the first part, could you read that first one real quick again, Matthew?
They said, pro bass is hard. Where are you from? #1 song to play on Ukraine videos.
Now, I actually didn't know that, but I'll make sure to try and observe that later on and pull up that song and listen to it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, on to the next.
We have a $3 super chat from Ivan Diablo, who does not put in a comment, but thank you very much for your support to the channel. And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Mark, who says, can you teach us something historical related to this conflict that's obscure? I love your work, but love my history.
And thank you so much for the support. And to try and teach something obscure yet historical, did y'all know that there was actually a group of people who lived in Crimea called the Crimean Tatars, and the Russians pretty much exterminated them during the time of the Soviet Union? It's not really relevant to the current war, but it's kind of relevant to the cultural the cultural makeup of Ukraine in the present day that's kind of led to the Russians saying what they say sometimes. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one. How many do we have left?
Let's see. We have about 10 left.
Goodness me. And all right, so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $3 super chat from NOYDB. And sadly, NOYDB, without verifying that statement, I can't read it off on stream. We can't risk defaming anybody, so we'll have to pass on that one. But thank you very much for your support to the channel. And up next, we have another $3 super chat from NOYDB, who says, I'm paying you 5 Canadian, so you say this is a 5 Canadian instead of 3 American. And actually, NOYDB, I have to convert it to American, or otherwise it'll screw up my entire spreadsheet and it'll throw everything out of whack. But thank you once again for your support. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Bob Perrin, who says, Steven Seagal is Sensei Lunchtime's lead acolyte.
That's a pretty good one. And so with that, thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. I know it's a little bit short, but we are pressed for time. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Edgy Number 1, once again, who says, liquidate Colonel Jen Midzenev, butcher of Mariupol.
And I would have to say, if that is the person who was the butcher of Mariupol during the Battle of Mariupol, I would have to say that he may have to be liquidated by Ukrainian forces at a later date. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Scrog CW, who says, search Steven Seagal Lama.
I will try, but right now, due to time reasons, we can't. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you very much for the support, but I'll make sure to try and do that off stream.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Wayne King, who says, much love from the UK and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, once again, from the good old United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And thank you very much for helping us to keep this stream running. I bet some people didn't think an American knew the full name of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or the French Republic, or the state of Ukraine, because they don't have an official name. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from CA Lags, actually a $4 super chat, and they say, Seagal hurt Kelly LeBrock. I hate him. And Donbass map looked like Marge Simpson.
I don't see that, but I'll take your credit for it. So that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And yes, he did. I think he actually hurt a couple of actors, and that may have been one of them. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Uber Khan, who says, beep boop. Started because I'm not a Russian bot. And that's a good reason to start that. If you're not a Russian bot, you should always remind us, beep boop. But thank you very much for your support of the channel. And that is our last super chat of the night. So now we are moving into our live chat questions, the long awaited moment that many of the viewers have been dying to get to. And the first question is from DL Hemingway, who says, do you think the US will give the Ukrainians the Ginsu Ninja missile and bomb?
I think we might not, because we may. I'm not really sure. I can't really tell you for certain, because we gave them harms, and I never thought we would give them those. Yet we did. So with that, I really can't answer that question with certainty to any degree. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and I'll have to leave that up to your imagination as to what the answer may be.
All right, and up next, we have a comment from Wretched Youth, who says, which type of aircraft could leave Ukraine to bomb the Kremlin? Could one crazy guy do it?
One crazy guy could pull it off in a very small plane that somehow just got lucky. But I don't think there's any aircraft in the Ukrainian inventory right now that could pull off a stunt like that. And so I hope that answers the question, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Mr. Diggs, who says, in the far future, will the Ukrainian Air Force be flying a Western jet, and which one?
It could be flying Western jets. I would largely assume that the first ones they get would either be the F-16 or the F-15. It seems to be the most readily available, has the most available parts, and also the largest amount of airframes that could be sent over. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. Once again, that's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Richard Parnell, who says, Enforcer or mercenaries covered by the Geneva Convention?
I don't think mercenaries are covered by the Geneva Convention, but unfortunately, due to time constraints, we can't really pull that up and check. But I do thank you very much for the good question. That is something that should be considered, and we will try and get an answer to in the future if we can. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Patrice Boyven, who says, say that if someone breaks the Espionage Act, they could lose their U.S. citizenship. And Patrice, I know what you're referencing. Sadly, I would like to get into it, but we can't because we'd be breaking one of our main rules. But in reference to things in general, maybe the Enforcer has an answer for that.
Unfortunately, I can't really speak about the Espionage Act all too well because, of course, it may start to get into breaking our golden rule, and also, I don't really know too much about it off the top of my head right now. I'd have to do a little bit of reading up and research on it to make sure I know exactly what I'm talking about before I started to speak on it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I'm sorry we couldn't really answer that question.
And up next, we have a question from Zach, who actually has a really good question, a pretty simple but really good one, who says, Enforcer, do tanks have keys? Can you lock it when you go shopping, or you can only lock it when you're inside?
I don't think tanks have keys. I think it's kind of like a push to start thing, like a lot of military vehicles are. And so I think the only thing you can do is lock the hatches once you're inside, but you really can't do anything from the outside of it with like keys or anything like that. And so I hope that answers the question. Once again, I don't have any evidence or information to back that statement up entirely, so take it with a grain of salt. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Anthony Riley, who says, Enforcer, why would Russia fire on the nuclear power plant when they have troops there, and why would Ukraine? Don't make sense.
The Russians may be firing on the power plant to try and create some worldwide tension. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but then again, they did fire on the Olenivka prisoner of war camp and kill dozens, if not hundreds, of Azov prisoners. So with that, I really can't give you an exact reasoning as to why the Russians did it, but then again, they've done a lot of crazy stuff over the course of this war. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope there can be an answer eventually as to why that happened.
And up next, we have a question from Santiago Flores, who says, Enforcer, I noticed the woodland camouflage uniforms on both sides, like the U.S. Army one. Did they copy it from other sources?
I'm not exactly sure, unfortunately. I can't really speak a lot about that camouflage pattern. I just know that the Ratnik camo is specifically the Ratnik. Ratnik camo, like this camo, is specifically Russian, and that's really the only pattern I can talk about with clear certainty. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I'm sorry I couldn't answer that question all too well.
And up next, we have a question from Bad Brad, who says, why don't they put 4 M270s on Snake Island and strike all of Crimea's military airfields, ammo dumps, and bridges?
That would be a good idea, but putting 4 of them on a single island in the middle of the sea could end up having them trapped there and then picked off and destroyed. So while it does seem like a good idea, it may be a massive gamble that would not pay off for the Ukrainians, and they just end up losing a lot of MLRSs that are incredibly rare and very expensive for them. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that answers the question as to why the Ukrainians may have not done that yet.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Ozzy Bugga, who says, question, there are a limited number of bridges Ukraine control in the upper Dnieper connecting and supplying the East Bank. Why are Russia not targeting them as Ukraine are in the south?
I'm not particularly sure why. I can't really speak as to why sometimes the Russians don't do things that seem obvious like that. It may just be incompetence, or it may be them trying to conserve their, I guess, efforts and weaponry for the southern front, where they're actually trying to make the ground and take the rest of Donetsk. I'm not really sure, and unfortunately, I would have to be in the Russian Ministry of Defense, which thank God I'm not, to be able to try and answer that question fairly well. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, at least in a way. And with that, we're going to answer 3 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And actually, I only have one more question in the spreadsheet, which is from Kenneth Watterson, who says, Enforcer, did you hear if the Switzerland is going to give Ukraine their newest weapon that came out back in the early 2017? I think it's like the M777 on a lake, really huge truck.
New Swiss weapons. List of equipment. Oh, they've had Renaults. Let's see. Scrolling through. I fortunately can't really find anything about it specifically. So unfortunately, I won't be able to comment on that. I'm gonna have to declare ignorance right now. The RSB 15. Let's pull that up. RSB 15. RBS 15. Is that Swiss? Is that Swiss? It's Swedish. I'm not really sure. I can't really tell you if this is the exact weapon you are talking about. I can't exactly tell you if they're going to be getting that one or not. And so with that, I hope we've answered the final question of tonight's stream, which kind of crept up on me really quickly. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. If you did enjoy, please make sure to subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. And I just thank you all so much once again for enjoying these streams and watching them. We still have 3,600 people on the stream watching 3 hours and 20 minutes in, which honestly is impressive to me. And I thank you all so much for being dedicated members of the Sleep Spring Army and enjoying the coverage that we give of the current war in Ukraine. And so with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for day 171 of the news of the war in Ukraine. Take care and have a great night or a great day, depending on where you're at.
Запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй